Chapter 3875. Wu. After the malicious ghost finished speaking, it opened its mouth and a dragon-shaped hurricane rushed into the river from the sky. Wu. A burst of heart-wrenching cries came from the river. Countless wandering souls with broken limbs were sucked out of the river and struggled to fall into the malicious ghost's mouth. The malicious ghost seemed to be still angry. It coldly snorted, and a huge fist appeared in front of its chest. With a boom, it hit the mountain next to the river. A mountain several hundred li in size was destroyed. Layers of underworld fruits fell from the mountain, and crystal-clear soul beads were shattered. The soul strands in the soul beads rushed into the air and turned into shapeless wandering souls that floated in all directions. Some sank into the river, some flew into the air, and some disappeared. After venting his anger, the magistrate's figure gradually shrank. The malicious ghost image turned into a black fog and roared as it flew towards a place in the palace. Poor Xiaohua, he thought that by pretending to be Duanmu Liangsheng, he would be able to frame the magistrate of hell for killing his clone. But what he didn't expect was that the magistrate of hell was still a magistrate of hell after all. There were many ways to find him. He still didn't know when the magistrate of hell would make a move on Xiaohua. At this time, Xiaohua didn't have time to care about what would happen in the future. He was now very interested in doing Yu Lao's shady business. After coming out of Wuyuan County's Zhujia village, Xiaohua immediately came across the Shuzhou cauldron. After collecting the Shuzhou cauldron, he immediately turned invisible and flew towards the North Sea. While flying, he frowned and thought about Zhu Cheng's words. But after flying for half a day, Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. He immediately took out the heavenly horse and the flying carriage. He also took Fujiwen out. Sure enough, the direction was a bit off. Xiaohua was really helpless. He angrily let Fujiwen drive the flying carriage and threw a Qingkuan pouch to Fujiwen, telling him to sprinkle some seeds down there. He took out the Kunlun mirror and pretended to release Yu Zhongquan and Chang Yuan from the space. As soon as the two appeared on the flying car, Xiaohua smiled. The two of them didn't notice that they had been moved out of the space by Xiaohua. Yu Zhongquan was still lying there with his eyes closed and a look of indifference on his face. Even his head was tilted to one side, and his fingers were slowly moving like a tiny ant. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't move, he would have already flown away. As for Chang Yuan, she lowered her head and carefully helped Yu Zhongquan wipe off the sweat on his forehead with a piece of silk. Xiaohua could tell at a glance that this piece of silk was torn from Chang Yuan's clothes. At this moment, Yu Zhongquan could not help but groan. Clearly, the netherworld energy in his body had begun to act up. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. Yu Lang Chang Yuan's heart ached as she whispered, You have to bear with it. I know. I don't need you to tell me that, Yu Zhongquan said. His eyes were still closed, but his teeth had already bitten his lips. His lips were ashen. Immediately, Yu Zhongquan's body involuntarily twitched. The netherworld energy and the true energy in Yu Zhongquan's body were entangled. Waves of noble qi were like small snakes scuttling around the surface of his body. Seeing the blue veins on Yu Zhongquan's forehead bulging and the blood on the surface of his skin gradually disappearing, Xiaohua raised his finger a bit. Just as he was about to move, he heard Yu Zhongquan shout, Chang Yuan, you are shameless. Why aren't you leaving? You and I are just engaged, we haven't married yet. How can we have skin contact? Do you know what it means to see no evil, to hear no evil, to speak no evil, and to move no evil? What Yu Lang said, this concubine doesn't understand. Who would have thought that Chang Yuan was not moved at all and whispered, This concubine only knows that a woman's virtue is to have no talent. If Yu Lang is alive, this concubine is Yu Lang's wife. If Yu Lang is gone, this concubine is Yu Lang's widow. Your grandmother, are you crazy? I haven't died yet, and you want to curse me? Ah. Yu Zhongquan angrily cursed, but before he could finish he screamed. His body suddenly stopped moving, and another wave of sweat fell down. Chang Yuan bit her lips and wiped the sweat off Yu Zhongquan's face with a silk handkerchief. Then, she wiped the sweat off Yu Zhongquan's body along his neck. Yu Zhongquan's lips moved and he said in a hoarse voice, Don't touch me. Damn Chang Yuan, don't you know? However, no matter what he said, Chang Yuan's face still turned red. She closed her eyes and stretched her arm into Yu Zhongquan's clothes, trying her best to wipe. Perhaps it was an accident. She didn't know where she touched, but Yu Zhongquan suddenly moved. His face revealed an awkward expression, as if he wanted to laugh but couldn't. His weak arm trembled slightly. Although the attentive Chang Yuan closed her eyes, she immediately felt it. She hurriedly opened her eyes and asked, "Yu Lang?" At this moment, the Pegasus flapped its wings and passed through a cloud. The sound of the wind stirring could be heard. Chang Yuan was slightly startled. She hurriedly raised her head and saw Xiaohua's smiling face. Master Chang Yuan felt a burst of shyness. She hurriedly tried to pull her arm out of Yu Zhongquan's clothes, but the more she was busy, the more she made mistakes. She didn't know where her arm was hanging, so she couldn't pull it out no matter what. Chang Yuan's face was as red as blood. The thick-skinned face she had when facing Yu Zhongquan earlier had long disappeared. Hearing Chang Yuan call him master, Yu Zhongquan slightly opened his eyes. Chang Yuan didn't tell Yu Zhongquan Xiaohua's name, nor did she tell him about her situation in the Yu clan. She only said that her master saved Yu Zhongquan, and she was here to serve him under her master's orders. Moreover, Yu Zhongquan was saved by Xiaohua after he fainted in the ghost cave, so he didn't know that Chang Yuan's master was Xiaohua. When Yu Zhongquan saw the familiar face, he was stunned at first, but then he said in surprise, You are immortal Xiao?" Xiaohua stood with his hands behind his back and replied with a smile, "Other than this Xiao, is there anyone else in this world who is so handsome?" Ah, not to mention Yu Zhongquan's reaction. Chang Yuan was first stupefied. She looked at Xiaohua in disbelief. She didn't understand why this master of hers, whose magical power reached the heavens, would say such frivolous words. Of course, such a handsome person like master is rarely seen in the world. Only the princess of the immortal palace is worthy of you. Fu Jiwen, who was driving the carriage at the front, chuckled and said, "Of course master's disciple is also as handsome as Jade, peerless in his generation. If others are blind, then there's no way." Senior martial brother at this time. Chang Yuan noticed that in addition to her master, that cheap senior martial brother was also driving the carriage at the front. So her face became even redder. Xiaohua unhappily rolled his eyes at Fu Jiwen and said, "You found yourself a female official of the immortal palace and wanted master to help you, so you wanted to find master a princess, right?" Hee, that's not it. Didn't disciple see junior martial sister so infatuated, so I thought of my wife in the immortal palace far away? Disciple is separated from immortal my humble wife, and it's not easy for us to even see each other. But when this guy looks at junior sister, he's not moved at all. Fu Jiwen said again, but unfortunately before he could finish, Xiaohua waved the Kunlun mirror and said, "This is a matter between the two of them. It has nothing to do with you. Go back and rest first." "Yes, master." Fu Jiwen knew that Xiaohua had something to say to Yu Zhongquan alone, so he smiled and entered the Kunlun wonderland. "Yu Zhongquan, we meet again." Xiaohua turned his head and looked at the lying Yu Zhongquan. He didn't help him up and said with a smile, "Ai, yes, immortal Xiao." Yu Zhongquan sighed and said, "The last time we met, immortal Xiao saved my life, and this time, you saved my life again. I don't know how to thank immortal Xiao." Speaking of this, Yu Zhongquan thought of something and hurriedly asked, "By the way, immortal Xiao, how are Zhu Xiang and my other friends?" Seeing that Yu Zhongquan had woken up and didn't ask about anything else but Zhu Xiang, Xiaohua knew that the current Yu Zhongquan was the same as the previous Yu Zhongquan. His temperament hadn't changed, so he replied with some regret. When this old man arrived, it was too late. Yu Song Zixiong and the others were all saved by this old man, but Zhu Xiang died in the ghost cave. However, you don't need to be sad for him. He got what he wanted. That's why he left, but he lived in the hearts of the Zhu family. At the same time, he changed Zhu Cheng's view of him, and he achieved his goal. Ai, yes. Yu Zhongquan sighed. Uncle Zhu was indeed too harsh on him. Even this you felt indignant for him. Being harsh has its benefits, and being relaxed has its drawbacks. Xiaohua said with a double meaning. Some people are so relaxed that they don't even go home, and they only cause trouble for their family. Who caused trouble? Yu Zhongquan stiffened his neck and said, This Yu upholds justice on behalf of the heavens, and gets rid of all the evildoers in the world. Your wish is good, your action is also good, but the consequences are not good. Xiao Hua ruthlessly interrupted his words and said indifferently, don't forget that you are a descendant of the Yu family, and your actions represent the Yu family. You may not think that you are causing trouble, but the trouble has already come to the Yu family. Master Chang Yuan worriedly said, can you first treat Yu Lang's injuries? Good disciple, don't worry, Xiao Hua said with a smile. With this master here, the ghost energy of the underworld won't dare to come out. Yes, master. Chang Yuan didn't dare to question Xiao Hua, and nervously looked at Yu Zhongquan. She wanted to help him up, but Yu Zhongquan didn't pay attention to her. My Yu family is a scholarly family. Although it is only from the 7th class, this Yu is no longer an ignorant youth, and will act appropriately. Yu Zhongquan didn't care. Xiao Hua looked at Chang Yuan with a smile and said, disciple, tell Yu Zhongquan what you encountered. Yes, master. Chang Yuan worriedly looked at Yu Zhongquan, and told him what happened. Yu Zhongquan's pale face became more and more bloodless. After all, if Xiao Hua didn't appear, not to mention Chang Yuan being taken away, even the Yu family would have suffered a disaster. To Yu Zhongquan, Xiao Hua was not just a life-saving grace. Even when Yu Zhongquan glanced at Chang Yuan, the disdain in his eyes seemed to have changed. Chapter 3876. Tell me the truth, Yu Zhongquan. After Chang Yuan finished speaking, Xiao Hua spoke again. This old man saved you entirely because of Chang Yuan. You must still remember what this old man said to you when we first met, right? Even this old man's purpose of going to Yifeng country was also because of Chang Yuan. Now this old man knows that Chang Yuan is the person this old man was looking for. And this old man has already accepted her as a disciple. As for you, although this old man said in front of others that he wanted to accept you as a disciple, it was to block the disaster for your Yu family. This old man doesn't care whether you accept me as a disciple or not. If you are willing, this old man will remove the yin qi from your body and you can go by yourself. Master Chang Yuan was shocked. She was originally a pure person, but when she heard that Xiao Hua wasn't going to accept a disciple, she couldn't help but hurriedly speak. Xiao Hua ignored Chang Yuan and shook the Kunlun mirror in his hand. Yuanya and Lu Yi also flew out of the Kunlun paradise and ordered, go you two go and help this blind thing up. Yuanya and Lu Yi were Yu Zhongquan's old friends. Yuanya had heard about Yu Zhongquan and Chang Yuan from Fujiwen in the Kunlun Wonderland. At this time, seeing the two of them like this, Yuanya immediately understood something. In fact, Lu Yi didn't need to do anything. Yuanya gently lifted Yu Zhongquan up. Hee brother Yu, we meet again. Lu Yi smiled and cupped his hands. Hello brother Lu. Yu Zhongquan was a little embarrassed, and also a little happy. He said in a low voice, hello brother Ya. And, good. Yuanya nodded in agreement and stood at the side. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate. He released his consciousness and swept it around Yu Zhongquan's body. Yu Zhongquan felt his body lighten. The netherworld qi that was like maggots in the bones immediately turned into yin qi and rushed out of Yu Zhongquan's body. Xiao Hua once again reached out and grabbed. Several crystal threads flashed, and the netherworld qi was caught by Xiao Hua. He slightly urged his magic power, and a bead smaller than a finger appeared out of thin air. Since the yin qi was gone, although Yu Zhongquan's divine power was a little weak, he could still move. He bowed and said, Junior thanks Immortal Senior for saving my life. And no need to thank me. Xiao Hua waved his hand and threw the pearl to Yu Zhongquan, saying, Zhu Xiang has already passed away. Take this as a souvenir. Yes, Junior understands. Zhongquan received it and carefully hid it. Then Xiao Hua took some medicinal pills and handed them to Yu Zhongquan, waved his hand and said, Yu Zhongquan, our karma should have ended here. The favor that this old man should have repaid to others has now been repaid. If you want to leave, no one will stop you. Master, although Chang Yuan knew that Xiao Hua was definitely stalling for time, her heart was still uneasy. She pleaded, even if Yu Lang is unwilling to stay, what about the matter that Master previously promised this disciple? No matter what, you have to do it, right? Hearing Chang Yuan's words, Yu Zhongquan's heart was greatly alarmed. This fellow originally had the temperament of someone who would not leave even if he said he would. At this moment, he hurriedly wanted to leave, but Xiaohua sighed and took out an item. As soon as this item appeared, Yu Zhongquan's soul was immediately sucked away. Even though he took 2 steps forward, he was still unwilling to leave, because in Xiaohua's hand was the Mandarin duck sword. The flying sword flashed with a cold light, and a surge of sharpness seemed to be able to split the void. In particular, the sword's splendor within the flying sword roamed, as if there was a sword spirit that could understand human nature. It firmly attracted Yu Zhongquan's eyes, and in his heart, he couldn't help admiring it. Xiaohua waved his hand, and the flying sword landed in front of Yu Zhongquan. The sword qi pierced Yu Zhongquan's skin, giving rise to a tearing feeling. Xiaohua sighed and said, "Forget it. Since this old man promised my disciple, I can't go back on my words. Yu Zhongquan, this is a flying sword that this old man obtained in his early years. Take it. Perhaps at this time, you still don't know how powerful this sword is. After you refine it, you will know. This old man isn't bragging, but even the spiritual weapons of the Tao sect may not be comparable to this sword." Xiaohua boasted twice, but it didn't break the 2 bulls' skin. Instead, it aroused Yu Zhongquan's curiosity. He wanted to take this flying sword, but he really couldn't bring himself to do it. If he didn't take it, his heart would feel like it was being scratched by a cat. It was very uncomfortable. "Brother Quan, are you still a man? If you want it, then take it. Master is very generous." How could Lu Yi not know what Yu Zhongquan was thinking? He laughed and said, "Besides, Master didn't force you to marry junior sister." Yu Zhongquan's face suddenly turned red. He grabbed the flying sword in his hand and shouted, "I'm taking it, so what? Even if you force me, I won't get married." Tch Xiaohua flicked his sleeve and said, "You can marry whoever you want. What does it have to do with this old man?" "Hee, Brother Quan, even if you take it, Master can't do anything to you." Louis laughed again and said, "However, you have the flying sword. Do you have the sword art to use it? If you want to learn the sword art from Master, then take him as your disciple. Master is very generous. Master won't force you to marry junior sister just because you want to take him as your disciple." Yu Zhongquan's neck stiffened and said, "Even if I take him as my disciple, I won't get married if Master forces me." "Then take him as your disciple." Of course, Louis knew that Yu Zhongquan had wanted to become his disciple a long time ago. However, back then, 7th Uncle Yu had stopped him, and Yu Zhongquan couldn't become his disciple. Today, if it wasn't for Chang Yuan, Yu Zhongquan would have already become his disciple. Therefore, Lu Yi wanted to fulfill Yu Zhongquan's wish. Yu Zhongquan was not a fool. Lu Yi gave him a way out. How could he not know how to step down? Humph, so be it. Saying this, Yu Zhongquan knelt down and kowtowed. This disciple wants to take Senior Immortal as his master. I wonder if Senior Immortal can teach this disciple the flying sword art? Humph, if it weren't for Chang Yuan's face, this old man wouldn't care about you. Xiaohua lifted his foot and kicked Yu Zhongquan, saying, "Get up and take out a drop of blood essence." "Ah, what does Master want to do?" Yu Zhongquan hadn't gotten up yet. He had heard a lot of legends about blood essence. His face slightly changed and he hurriedly asked. Louis was very anxious and hurriedly transmitted his voice. "You idiot, haven't you heard of the blood essence of a spirit weapon?" "Ah yes, Yu Zhongquan, as if awakened from a dream, hurriedly urged a drop of blood essence and respectfully handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua faintly glanced at Yu Zhongquan, then he raised his hand and grabbed. The essence blood rushed into the air. As he cast several seals, the essence blood surged like boiling water. When the essence blood produced layers of blood vessels, Xiaohua raised his hand again, and a faint tiger shape flew out from his fingertips. This tiger shape shook twice in the air, and turned into a deer shape. This deer shape fell into the essence blood at the same time, as when it fell into Chang Yuan's flying sword. When the deer shape let out a clear cry, it fell into the essence blood. Quick Xiaohua waved his hands and several crystal lights fell. The blood essence rapidly rotated, and obscure textures and talismans gradually appeared on the surface of the blood essence. A blood-colored deer was gradually born. Go. Xiaohua made a grabbing motion, and the deer-shaped sword intent fell into the flying sword. Clang! A sword cry soared into the sky, and the flying sword almost slipped out of Yu Zhongquan's hand. Yu Zhongquan, you have already practiced the flying sword technique. Master will seal this sword intent into the flying sword. In the process of refining the flying sword, comprehend this sword intent well, and it will make you twice the result with half the effort. Xiaohua said earnestly. Take out your previous flying sword. Yes, master. Yu Zhongquan opened his mouth, and the previous flying sword flew out. Xiaohua raised his hand and grabbed, and the flying sword immediately melted into a mass of juice and floated in the air. Xiaohua swept it with his divine sense and said coldly, your flying sword technique has already deviated. If you practice it for more than 30 years, you will definitely die from the backlash of sword qi. Yu Zhongquan's mind hurt. He knew that Xiaohua had erased the spirit imprint he left in the flying sword. Hearing Xiaohua's words, his face became even paler. Your divine sense technique has not reached the Desheng level, and you still want to plant a sword heart. You are really eager for quick success. This is definitely not the flying sword technique of your Confucian cultivation. Xiaohua raised his hand and pressed it between Yu Zhongquan's eyebrows and said, this is the technique of strengthening the divine sense, and this old man's flying sword technique. You can slowly practice it. Thank you, master. Yu Zhongquan kowtowed a few more times, and then sincerely got up. Chang Yuan was beaming with joy as she watched from the side. She could almost feel the aura of the sword intent on Yu Zhongquan's flying sword. Since Yu Zhongquan wanted to comprehend the sword intent, then he must have the same heart as her. Wasn't that what she wanted? When Yu Zhongquan opened his mouth and sucked the flying sword into his middle dantian, the corners of Xiaohua's mouth curled up, and he was secretly proud. No matter how rebellious Yu Zhongquan was, in the end, didn't he still fall into Xiaohua's trap? No need to thank master. Xiaohua looked at Yu Zhongquan's appearance, and he was both angry and amused. He thought for a moment and said, master will first let you read a story. With that, Xiaohua raised his hand slightly, and a finger pointed between Yu Zhongquan's eyebrows. This finger looked very similar to the finger on Chang Yuan's forehead before, but it was completely different from before. Now that Xiaohua's soul cultivation was almost complete, and he could control the origin power of the underworld, this soul technique was really easy to use. There was no need to use any soul silk, and there was no need to consume too much soul power. Yu Zhongquan saw that everything in the world fell into Xiaohua's finger, and all of this turned into a stream of light and rushed into his mind. Tianmen Mountain Little Cabbage, Yu Zhongquan, Wanderer Indecent Assault, and so on appeared scene after scene. Sure enough, in a moment, 2 streams of tears flowed from Yu Zhongquan's eyes and slowly fell. Before the tears dripped to his chin, Yu Zhongquan opened his eyes. His eyes were full of regret, attachment, and expectation. However, when Yu Zhongquan looked at Chang Yuan, he found that Chang Yuan didn't move, as if she didn't see him. Even Lu Yi and Yuanya were the same. Do you understand? Xiaohua looked at Yu Zhongquan and asked softly. Disciple understands. Yu Zhongquan looked at Chang Yuan and said warmly, if Chang Yuan is Little Cabbage, and disciple is Yu Zhongquan, then disciple owes her too much. Disciple also thanks master for his painstaking efforts. Chapter 38-77. Unfortunately, the previous life is the previous life, and this life is this life. Xiaohua said with a smile. Yu Zhongquan, since you understand, then master will make you forget. Can you bear to? Yu Zhongquan closed his eyes and raised his head slightly. Some tears flowed from his eyes again. Then, Yu Zhongquan nodded and said, disciple understands master's words. Disciple is too naughty and has made master worry. Since this is the current life, disciple should forget everything from the previous life. Disciple is willing to start from this life, willing to start from this moment. Good. Xiaohua reached out and touched Yu Zhongquan's forehead again. Yu Zhongquan closed his eyes and opened them again. He touched his face in surprise and said, "Ayo master, what happened to disciple? You feel honored to be the disciple of a handsome Taoist cultivator like master. You can't help but be moved to tears." Xiaohua replied indifferently, "Lu Yi, ride the flying carriage to Gun Province. Master is tired and wants to rest for a while. Yes, master. Louis didn't dare to delay, and hurriedly rode the Pegasus to Gun Province. Yuanya also sat beside the Pegasus and accompanied Louis. Chang Yuan looked at the two's back and thought for a while. Then she smiled and said, Junior brother Yu, the heart has a sword, and the sword soul is born. What does this mean? What? Junior brother? Yu Zhongquan jumped up like a cat whose tail was stepped on. How did I become a junior brother? Not only are you a junior brother, but you are also the youngest. Louis replied with a smile. Yu Zhongquan was dumbfounded. This no one forced you to get married. Your senior sister from the same sect is asking you a question. Can you not answer? Yuanya looked at the ambiguous relationship between the two, and said with envy in his heart. This Yu Zhongquan hesitated for a moment. Then, like a defeated rooster, he lowered his head and answered Chang Yuan's question. Yes, the previous life is the previous life, and the current life is the current life. Why bother with it? Xiao Hua sat cross-legged in the flying carriage with his eyes closed in meditation. Although there were no fluctuations around him, his Dao heart and Dao realm were improving rapidly. The karma technique was also gradually becoming clearer. It wasn't just a single day. Dark clouds covered the sky in front of him, lightning flashed, and rain poured down like a heavenly river. Louis hesitated for a moment. At this moment, two telepathic thoughts scanned the area from the left. Once they discovered the flying car, they immediately retracted it. Oh. Xiaohua opened his eyes and instructed. Louis, stop for a moment. How far is this place from the Fiend God blood pool? All right, father understands. Louis stopped the flying chariot and said respectfully, We are already in Gun Province. According to the information I gathered, we are about 5,000 kilometers away from the Godfiend blood pool. And it looks like someone is coming over. You should return to the Kunlun immortal realm to cultivate. Master will call Fujiwen out. Xiaohua raised his eyes to look at the place where the dark clouds were gradually spreading and said with narrowed eyes. Yes, master. Louis bowed respectfully. Xiaohua took out the Kunlun mirror and put Louis away before letting Fujiwen out. Master, you've decided to go to the Godfiend blood pool? Fujiwen looked around and asked when he saw the flying carriage stopped in midair. Xiaohua nodded. That's right. These days, Master has carefully pondered over Zhu Cheng's words. They do make some sense. Previously, Master didn't know that there were so many conflicts within the 100 schools of Confucian cultivators, so Master blindly hid my strength, afraid of being noticed by them. But after hiding for a long time, I was still attacked by the Immortal Palace. Instead of that, it's better to take advantage of the conflicts between the 100 schools of Confucian cultivators, and the gap between the Immortals and Buddhas to form some alliances. Although the soaring Dragon Mountain Range's Fortune Gate does not need to be known by others, the forces Master obtained in the Jade Pavilion banquet must be used. AI, Master's ability to judge the situation is still inferior to the Zhu family's patriarch. Master is thinking too much. Fujiwen comforted. Zhu Cheng is the Zhu family's patriarch. He has received training in this area since he was young. Master is benevolent and focused on cultivation, so Master is naturally weak in this area. Didn't Master often say that? There's no need to be envious of others. That's true, Master is somewhat undervaluing himself. Oh, that's right, disciple. How do you feel after the heavenly book was sealed? Xiaohua nodded slightly and asked. Fujiwen smiled apologetically. Ever since Disciple's heavenly book was sealed by Master, Disciple suddenly felt empty in Disciple's heart. Other than reciting some books, Disciple refined his true qi. Disciple seemed to have understood a little, but also seemed to not understand much. However, this kind of dull cultivation was what Disciple liked in the early years. AI, as the saying goes, dull is real. Perhaps this kind of cultivation method without desires is the right way. In the early years, you condensed the heavenly book in your body, because you were dull and followed fate. If you were so eager for quick success in the early years, heavenly book probably wouldn't have been fated with you. Xiaohua sighed. Let's not talk about you. Even today's Confucian cultivators seem to have made mistakes in their pursuit, and have long deviated from their previous principles. Of course, This kind of mistake might be an improvement, or it might be correct. However, without the cultivation of one's heart, how can one achieve the great Tao? Yes, disciple understands. Fu Jiwen said sincerely. If disciple didn't meet master, disciple would have already fallen. The problem is, if disciple didn't meet master, disciple wouldn't be so eager for quick success. Xiaohua said with a smile. He raised his hand and a three-colored flame appeared between his middle finger. Inside the flame, there were 4 colors flowing. Xiaohua looked at the fire spot, and his eyes lit up. These are some wonderful things that master has just obtained. Although they are not complete, they are enough for you to comprehend. If you can comprehend 30% of them, you will be able to control the heavenly book. Fu Jiwen hurriedly knelt on the ground and said, Thank you, master, for your help. Xiaohua waved his hand, and the flame fell from the top of Fu Jiwen's head and entered his middle dantian. The true qi in Fu Jiwen's chest immediately became lively, as if it had a life of its own. Get up. Xiaohua helped Fu Jiwen up and said, Whether it's cultivation or doing things, remember that haste makes waste. Don't be too radical in the future. Yes, master. Disciple doesn't dare anymore. Fu Jiwen replied respectfully. At this point, Fu Jiwen raised his head in surprise and asked, Master, someone is coming? Yes, it should be Dao sect cultivators. I wonder if they're heading to the fiend god blood pool? Or do they have ulterior motives? Xiaohua replied indifferently, We'll wait here. Not long after, 2 cultivators in Daoist robes flew over together. The 2 of them were only in the gold core stage. When they flew close, their gazes fell on Xiaohua and they were both stunned. Then the 2 of them sped up and arrived in front of the flying car. They respectfully saluted and said, Juniors Su Chuanping and Chenjue greet Senior Xiao. Xiaohua was surprised to see the 2 of them recognize him, but there was nothing unusual on his face. He raised his hand and said, Get up, let's talk on the flying car. Thank you, Senior. As the 2 of them spoke, they did not dare to be negligent and boarded the flying car. They smiled and nodded at Fu Jiwen, who was driving the car, and sat cross-legged in front of Xiaohua. Su Chuanping glanced at Chenjue and said, Senior Xiao, Junior heard that in front of the Black Wind Ridge, Senior displayed his divine might and defeated the immortal general of the Immortal Palace. This has greatly increased the prestige of our Dao sect cultivators. After Junior heard this, I really wanted to fly to the Black Wind Ridge to witness Senior's might. Hee, how could it be as exaggerated as the legends say? Xiaohua waved his hand and laughed. The real situation is far from what you think. Although I was able to escape unscathed, the Black Wind Ridge and the Jiang country were both destroyed by the Immortal Palace. I have been on tenterhooks for the past few days, afraid that the Immortal Palace will attack again. Senior is too modest. Chenjue laughed and said, Since Senior has defeated that true Lord Qingyuan, how could the Immortal Palace send any other immortal generals over? Wouldn't bullying the weak be laughed at by others? They flattened the Jiang country and the Black Wind Ridge, and barely had a fig leaf to cover their shame, so they could explain it to the Confucian cultivators. Yes, perhaps. Xiaohua nodded. But I am indeed. Sai, forget it, let's not talk about the Black Wind Ridge anymore. Where are the 2 of you heading to? Su Chuanping blinked his eyes and laughed. Is there even a need to say? Naturally, we have the same goal as Senior Xiao. Oh, Xiaohua asked with interest. Could it be that the 2 of you know where I am going? Su Chuanping laughed. We heard that the Chu family of the Jing state had sent out a hero's invitation, wanting to find a demon god's chest in the blood god's pool of gods and devils. Our cultivation realms are still shallow, so we cannot enter the eyes of the Chu family. However, the blood god's pool is a place of opportunity, so we came to take a look. As for Senior, if Junior's guess is correct, you must have received a hero's invitation to head to the blood god's pool. Or perhaps Senior did not receive the hero's invitation, and is heading to the blood god's pool this time to come into contact with the Jing state's Chu family? Of course, this is all just our wild guesses. If it's wrong, Senior, please don't be angry. Yes, your thoughts are more or less the same. Xiaohua nodded. I have offended the Immortal Palace. Although the Immortal Palace might not have the time to take care of me right now, once they have the opportunity, They will definitely use thunderous methods to deal with me. I have no choice but to make preparations in advance. Senior is right. Since Senior was able to defeat true monarch Qingyuan, your cultivation has already surpassed the Immortal Palace's bottom line. Aristocratic families of the 3rd class and above might look down on Senior's strength, and aristocratic families of the 5th class and below would not dare to go against the Immortal Palace's orders. Since Senior does not want to be arrested by the Immortal Palace, it is appropriate for you to come into contact with the 4th class Chu family, Chenjue said with a smile. Xiaohua smiled. He understood that Su Chuanping and Chenjue had misunderstood that he wanted to rely on the Chu family. However, he did not explain and asked again. During this time, I have been hiding from the Immortal Palace's pursuit, so information is somewhat blocked. I have a question to ask the two of you. Senior, please speak. Chenjue hurriedly said. Actually, I am a bit curious. Although Xiaohua already had a plan in mind and knew that the matter of the Blood God's pool was not as simple as Song Zixiong had said, he still wanted to hear Su Chuanping and Chenjue's opinions. Only then did he ask. The Divine Devil's Chess is only one of the 10 great imperial artifacts, and it is only ranked 5th. Why is the Chu family searching for it with such great fanfare? Especially since the Chu family is in Jing State. Isn't it a bit excessive for them to reach out to Gun State? Chapter 3878. This Su Chuanping and Chenjue's faces were slightly awkward, but they immediately smiled and said, to tell you the truth, we also feel that it's a bit strange. However, this is a matter of a scholarly family. We don't have much information, so it's hard to guess. Anyway, we only want to look for opportunities. If possible, it's best to form a good relationship with the Chu family. If we have any difficulties in the future, we can ask them for help. As for the strangeness of the matter, we really didn't think much about it. That's true, Xiaohua smiled. This has nothing to do with us Taoism cultivators. Why should we care about it? Even if the Chu family occupies the Immortal Palace, it has nothing to do with us. Yes, Su Chuanping and Chenjue hurriedly nodded. If that's the case, we Taoism cultivators might even be able to benefit from it. Fu Jiwen, who was waiting in front of the carriage, heard Xiaohua's words and was moved. He hurriedly transmitted his voice. Master, disciple faintly heard that the 9 provinces of the hidden immortal continent are respectively controlled by 100 scholarly families. Jing province and Gun province. Could it be that they're controlled by a scholarly family? That's right. Fu Jiwen's reminder immediately woke Xiaohua up, and he transmitted his voice. There are vague records in scholarly books. However, Jing province and Gun province aren't controlled by a scholarly family. Jing province belongs to the school of legalism, while Gun province belongs to the school of military. If I'm not mistaken, the Chu family belongs to the school of legalism, while Gun province should be controlled by the school of military of the Immortal Palace. For the Chu family to extend their hands to the Godfiend blood pool of military, I'm afraid there's something fishy that others don't know about. Could it be? Fu Jiwen was shocked. The school of legalism wants to take advantage of the war between immortals and Buddhas to invade the Immortal Palace's power on the hidden immortal continent. How can a 4th-rate family be so daring? Xiaohua sneered. There must be other scholarly families behind the Chu family. For great families, Fu Jiwen blurted out, Dongfang, Shimen, Nangong, and Baiming. It seems that Zhu Qing was right. Xiaohua nodded. Maybe Zhu Qing already saw through the secret, but he was afraid that I wouldn't be able to put my face down. So he sent me to the Godfiend blood pool. If I can make contact with the 4 great families, they'll definitely protect me. I won't have to be afraid of the Immortal Palace. But from another perspective, I've also become a pawn of the 4 great clans. The 4 great clans. Are you planning to use the Confucian cultivators and Taoist cultivators of the hidden immortal continent as chess pieces? Seeing that Xiaohua had his head lowered in thought, Chenjue thought for a moment and hurriedly said, Junior received a piece of news before. I don't know if it has anything to do with the Chu family's actions in the blood pool of gods and devils. Oh, fellow Taoist, please speak. Xiaohua raised his head and asked. Actually, this isn't the first time the Chu clan has done something like this. When I was still a Foundation Establishment cultivator, I saw a nascent soul cultivator receive a command talisman from the Chu clan. The command talisman said that the Chu clan wanted this senior to go to a certain place to help. At that time, it wasn't as grand as it is now, but many Taoist cultivators knew about it. But for some reason, there was no news from that time. I don't know if this is related to the last time. Command talisman. Xiaohua calmed down and smiled. Have you seen that command talisman before? I have. Chunjua nodded and replied. It's somewhat similar to the tiger talisman used by the secular world. Is it this? Xiaohua took out the token Chumuhuan gave him back then and asked. Chunjua glanced at it and smiled. Senior Xiao really received an invitation from the Jing province's Chu clan. This item is exactly the same as the one I saw. And Xiaohua replied thoughtfully. This token wasn't obtained by this old man recently. It was given to me by a Chu clan disciple a long time ago. Speaking of which, this old man owes him a favor. Actually, if fellow Taoist hadn't mentioned it, this old man wouldn't have thought that the token from that time had anything to do with this. With this token, we can meet the Chu clan's patriarch. This trip won't be in vain. Chen Zhua and Su Chuanping glanced at each other, and hurriedly stood up and cupped their hands. Senior Xiao, please, introduce us to you. Xiaohua waved his hand and gestured for the two to sit down. It's fate that brought us together. Follow this old man to the fiend god blood pool. As for whether you can get anything good, it'll depend on your luck. Master, the thunderstorm ahead has stopped. Should we continue? At this moment, Fu Jiwen asked from the front. Xiaohua smiled. Of course we should. Although I don't know what the Chu clan has planned, the earlier we go, the more benefits we can get. He senior is right. Chen Zhua and Su Chuanping smiled. Fu Jiwen urged the flying carriage to fly into the thunderstorm. However, Chen Zhua suddenly realized something. He looked at Fu Jiwen and asked in a low voice, Senior Xiao, is this your disciple? Xiaohua understood Chen Zhua's misgivings and smiled. This old man has been conquered by the immortal palace. Who cares about their bullshit rules? Yes. Chen Zhua smiled and said. This junior knows. Actually, what this junior wants to ask is, why did senior accept a Confucian disciple? Oh, so fellow Taoist is asking about this. Xiaohua suddenly realized something and replied. This old man also knows a little about the cultivation method of Confucian cultivators. This old man taught this disciple the cultivation method of Confucian cultivators. Ah, Senior Xiao. Chen Zhua was surprised and his eyes flashed with envy. Su Chuanping said with a bit of jealousy. No wonder Senior was able to get the Chu clan's token. With Senior's identity as a dual Confucian cultivator, not to mention a fourth-rank aristocratic family, even a second-rank aristocratic family would welcome you. That's Senior Xiao, Chen Zhua said flatteringly. This one has been cultivating for so long, but I have never heard of a Taoist cultivator on the hidden immortal continent who is proficient in both Confucian and Taoist cultivation. After saying this, Chen Zhua and Su Chuanping saw that Xiaohua was really amiable and approachable, so they hurriedly took this opportunity to ask him about the difficulties they faced in their cultivation. Xiaohua just listened for a bit, and knew that they had made mistakes in their cultivation. He then gave them pointers in their cultivation according to what the two said. Just as the two were immersed in listening, a few days passed in the blink of an eye. They saw a red haze in the distance like a huge steamer, with red steam rising from the ground all the way to the sky. The area it covered was so large that even Xiaohua's soul sense couldn't see the end of it. Master Fu Jiwen stopped the flying carriage. He frowned and said in a low voice, the demonic god blood pool is in front of us. However, it seems a bit different from when this disciple first came here. Xiaohua heard the explanation and withdrew his soul sense. He asked in a low voice, what's the difference? When this disciple first came to the Gun province, his cultivation wasn't very high, so he could only watch from afar. The demonic god blood pool didn't have so much blood mist above it. Even birds can't fly over it. The main reason is that there is no place to rest in the blood pool. Ordinary birds can't fly over it without rest. But now, the blood mist has covered an area of 10,000 miles. Even birds can't enter. Fu Jiwen looked into the distance and said carefully, Also, this place is still some distance away from the blood pool. But the air is filled with a kind of evil aura. It smells like a sharp sword that can hurt people. Not only is it very sharp, but it also gives people the urge to kill. Young friend Fu is right. Chen Zhua and Su Chuanping had stood up long ago. Chen Zhua said, "This demonic god blood pool has changed greatly. The area of the blood pool seems to have increased a bit. When I came here earlier, the edge of the blood pool seemed to still be inside." Su Chuanping nodded. It's probably the changes in the demonic god blood pool that attracted the attention of the Jing province's Chu clan. That's why they came here from so far away. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and looked at the steam-like blood mist. His soul sense couldn't see the entirety of the demonic god blood pool, nor could it penetrate into the blood mist. There seemed to be a strange restriction in the blood mist. This restriction seemed to have a life of its own. As it slowly changed, it also devoured Xiaohua's soul sense. Xiaohua didn't dare act rashly. Moreover, after arriving here, Xiaohua had the same feeling as when he heard about the blood pool of gods and devils from Fujiwen. Xiaohua's heart really did give birth to a faint feeling. This feeling was very familiar to Xiaohua, but when he thought about it carefully, it was also unfamiliar. It seemed to be a kind of summoning, but also a kind of vigilance. It was really difficult to grasp. In particular, Xiaohua was still some distance away from the fiend god blood pool. He could smell the scent of the netherworld blood sea. Things are getting more and more interesting. Xiaohua couldn't help but think to himself, who is it? Who dares to come to my Chu clan's forbidden area? Just when Xiaohua wanted to order Fujiwen to fly down, a divine sense swept over. Then several clear eyes techniques swept over at the same time. An arrogant voice immediately sounded in everyone's ears. Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the source of the voice. Several sword lights streaked across the sky. Several third-grade essence energy Confucian scholars wearing tight clothes flew over from the distance. The one in front had a long and narrow face like a red date. He was standing on a fiery red flying sword. Fellow immortal Chen Zhua and Su Chuanping naturally couldn't let Xiaohua go out to answer. The two flew out of the flying car and bowed. "I am Chen Zhua of Yangzhou's Sipping Mountain, Su Chuanping of Huyu Villa. Behind I is Xiaohua, Daoist Xiao and his disciple." The four of us heard that the Chu clan was spreading the hero's invitation in the hidden immortal continent. "We came here to help the Chu clan." The person in front stopped. The several Confucian scholars behind him also stopped their sword lights. The red-faced Confucian scholar coldly snorted and said, "My Chu clan is spreading the hero's invitation in the hidden immortal continent. We naturally welcome capable heroes. However, we may not welcome crooked melons and split dates who want to take advantage of the situation." Chen Zhua and Su Chuanping's faces instantly turned red. The two of them only had a cultivation of gold core. They weren't much stronger than these people. However, looking at these third-grade essence energy Confucian scholars patrolling back and forth, even if the two of them could enter the god-devil blood pool, what kind of advantage could they take? This Confucian scholar's words couldn't be considered wrong. Chapter 3879. Just when Chen Zhua and Su Chuanping didn't know how to answer. You're looking for a beating." Xiaohua snorted coldly, and then, a gust of wind suddenly swept between the two. "You dare!" The leading scholar suddenly cried out, and then, a loud slap was heard. Chen Zhua and Su Chuanping stared blankly as a blood-red palm print appeared on the scholar's face. "How dare you!" Behind the leading Confucian scholar, several other Confucian scholars shouted as they surrounded Xiaohua's flying carriage with their sword lights. The other scholars thought that the red-faced scholar had been careless and had been ambushed, but the red-faced scholar understood very well. When he heard the other side's cold snort, he immediately urged his sword light to dodge, but a palm suddenly arrived in the gust of wind. That palm seemed to have blocked the entire world in front of him. Even if he wanted to dodge, he simply couldn't. The red-faced scholar stretched out his finger in surprise and cried out, He never thought that there would be such a powerful Taoist cultivator in the hidden immortal continent, who actually dared to slap him as soon as they met. But suddenly, the red-faced scholar thought of something and said in surprise, You're Xiaohua? Blackwind Mountain's Xiaohua? Taoist Master Xiao? The several Chu family disciples naturally weren't as short-sighted as Chen Zhuo and Su Chuanping. Previously, they just didn't think that Xiaohua would appear so magnanimously. Now that they heard the red-faced scholars cry and carefully looked at Xiaohua's appearance, how could they not know that this was the legendary Taoist Xiaohua who swallowed 100,000 immortal soldiers in one gulp? After each of them cried out in surprise and attacked, they were at a loss. Fortunately, the red-faced scholar's reaction was quite sharp. He hurriedly turned his head and sternly swept a glance at the few people, then promptly bowed and said, "Junior Chu Jing greets Taoist Master Xiao." Junior Chu Feng, how could the scholars surrounding Xiaohua's flying carriage not know the pros and cons? They already understood Chu Jing's meaning, and didn't dare to be negligent. They simultaneously bowed and said, "Greetings Taoist Master Xiao." Xiaohua faintly nodded and asked, "This old man can't be considered a hero. Now that this old man has come to the blood pool of gods and devils, can your Chu family welcome me?" Of course, of course. Hearing this, the fear in his heart unconsciously gradually disappeared. He hurriedly said with a smile, "If Taoist Master Xiao can't be considered a hero, then no Taoist cultivator in the hidden immortal continent is a hero. My Chu family naturally welcomes Senior to participate in this event." Previously, this junior didn't recognize Taoist Master Xiao. To welcome Taoist Master, Taoist to wait a moment, Taoist for a moment, this junior to ask my might to personally to welcome the guest to welcome for you two. For he didn't. Teat, to send to send Taoist. To send. To send. Xiaohua knew that his current identity was special, so he thought for a moment and nodded. "Feel free to send a message. However, let me remind you that you shouldn't have any other thoughts. I'm not even afraid of 100,000 immortal soldiers, so a mere pool of fiend gods might not be able to stop me." Yes, this junior understands. Chu Jing bit his lips. He was helpless against Xiaohua's threat. Taoist Master Qing Su and the others had already spread Xiaohua's name to the extreme. Moreover, in these tens of thousands of years, apart from the Grand Mist ancestor who dared to face the Immortal Palace and the Lane Temple, the other Taoist cultivators were not as powerful as Xiaohua. 100,000 immortal soldiers and Taoist Master Qing Yuan were actually defeated by Xiaohua. If he wasn't a Taoist cultivator, everyone would think he was a great demon of the demon race. One had to admit, rumors and barbarian words were sometimes really scary. Chu Jing turned to look at the disciple who was about to send a message and said solemnly, "Chu Feng, go back in person and report to Ancestor Master Chu. Ask him to come in person." Chu Feng was stunned. Seeing Chu Jing's expression, he immediately understood. He hurriedly saluted Xiaohua respectfully and said, "Taoist Master Xiao, please wait a moment. This junior will ask Ancestor Master to come and welcome me." Xiaohua unhappily nodded in agreement. These words sounded nice, but in fact, he was asking the Chu family's Ancestor Master to decide whether or not he dared to let him enter the Godfiend blood pool. This Ancestor Master Chu Jianjin was presumably a decisive figure in the Godfiend blood pool. Chu Feng hurriedly flew away. The Chu family disciples surrounding the flying car felt somewhat uneasy. Previously, they were prepared to besiege the flying car, but now they were scattered around Xiaohua, this fiend. How could they not feel afraid? Chu Jing's eyes turned. He endured the cold sweat that involuntarily appeared on his back and said in a low voice, "Senior, Chu Ming and the others still have to patrol. There's no harm in letting this junior accompany Senior here. Go." Xiaohua secretly laughed and waved his hand. The several people hurriedly bowed and saluted as if relieved of a heavy burden. Xiaohua looked at their slightly panicked appearance and asked Chu Jing, "The Chu family has sent out invitations to find the Godfiend chest in the Godfiend blood pool. I wonder when it will start. How many immortal friends have come here?" Senior, when Chu Jing heard this, the sweat from before immediately appeared again. He said with a smile, "This junior is only a low-level disciple of the Chu family. I came to the Godfiend blood pool to patrol." This junior really doesn't know what Senior is talking about. When Chu Jing said this, Xiaohua didn't feel anything, but Chen Zhuo and Su Chuanping blushed with shame. They still wanted to come to the Godfiend blood pool to take advantage of it, but they didn't expect that, The Chu family's third-level origin energy disciples could only be reduced to patrol. What could they do here? Xiaohua nodded and said, since you don't know these things, you should know how big the Godfiend blood pool is now and what changes there are in the periphery, right? Yes, this junior naturally knows this. Chu Jing was originally a patrol. If he said that he didn't know this, it would be an excuse. Chu Jing naturally didn't dare and hurriedly replied. The Godfiend blood pool originally had a circumference of 10,000 li. Now that it has changed, it has expanded to 13,000 li. As for what the change is, this junior isn't too clear. However, this junior knows that the Godfiend blood pool's surroundings were originally sparsely populated. But now that it has expanded another 3,000 li, hundreds of thousands of people were included. These people all turned into white bones overnight. Si Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air and said in shock, so many living things. Yes, Chu Jing also lamented. Not only were so many commoners killed in one night, even my Chu family's disciples were caught off guard and lost many. Hearing this, Xiaohua smiled and said meaningfully, so your Chu family has been paying attention to the Godfiend blood pool for a long time. Oh, senior misunderstood. Chu Jing was slightly stunned and immediately understood. He said with a smile, the Godfiend blood pool's change was only a matter of a month ago. At that time, my Chu family had already sent out invitations. A month ago? Xiaohua frowned and seemed to have understood something in his heart. He then asked, could it be the Night of 100 Ghosts? How did Senior know? Chu Jing was shocked, but his shock wasn't because Xiaohua accurately told him the time of the Godfiend blood pool's change, but because of a lingering fear. What's so difficult about that? Xiaohua said with a faint smile. A month ago, wasn't it around the 15th of the 7th month? Do you think it's possible that it was the Night of 100 Ghosts? Alas, it is indeed as Senior said. Chu Jing sighed and said, when my Chu family came to the Godfiend blood pool, the Godfiend blood pool had indeed changed a bit, but it was definitely not as terrifying as we had expected. That night, the blood pool suddenly surged. Not to mention the martial uncles who were exploring the blood pool. Even the disciples who were patrolling around the Godfiend blood pool suffered. Although this junior doesn't know exactly how many people of the Chu family died in the Godfiend blood pool. Among the disciples who were patrolling with this junior that night, 10 of them were swallowed by the blood mist. This junior watched as they turned into white bones. Even you Chu family disciples couldn't escape, let alone those pitiful commoners. Xiaohua lowered his head and looked at the distant mountains and fields. Although there were still some beautiful outlines, there was an inexplicable dusk inside, and it was gradually becoming barren. That's right, Chu Jing nodded. Those commoners probably didn't even wake up from their sleep before speaking of this. A coughing sound came from afar. Chu Jing hurriedly stopped and turned his head to look, only to see a burly middle-aged man in a tight suit. There was an indescribable melancholy between his eyebrows as he flew over absent-mindedly. Martial ancestor Chu Jing didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly bowed. You've come. That middle-aged man flew over, indifferently swept a glance at Xiaohua and the others, and coldly asked, You're Xiaohua? Xiaohua looked at this man from head to toe, and a strange feeling emerged in his heart. The melancholy on this man's face was very obvious, and there was no need to say anything. Although the man's gaze was cold, Xiaohua could still read a kind of dissociation, a kind of sorrow, and a kind of despair from this gaze. Yes, I'm Xiaohua. Xiaohua nodded, looked at this 4th-grade upper-rank Confucian cultivator, and replied, Immortal friend, are you Chu Jianjin? Oh, Chu Jing hurriedly explained. Daoist Xiao, this is martial ancestor Chu Yang, my Chu family's great deacon. Martial ancestor Chu Jianjin is my Chu family's steward. Presumably, there are many seniors in the Godfiend blood pool now. He doesn't have time to come over. Actually, there was no need for Chu Jing to explain. Xiaohua already understood Chu Jianjin's arrangement. It wasn't that the Chu family was deliberately being disrespectful. If they were, the Chu family wouldn't have needed Chu Yang to come over to welcome him. The Chu family was still willing to let Xiaohua come to the Godfiend blood pool, and even had the intention to further contact him, which was why they sent Chu Yang, a great deacon second only to Chu Jianjin, to welcome him. If the Immortal Palace wanted to pursue this matter in the future, The Chu family would also have room to maneuver. Of course, if there was really the worst outcome, this Chu Yang would naturally be the scapegoat that the Chu family needed to sacrifice. Chapter 3880. Xiaohua would never make things difficult for a scapegoat like Chu Yang. He smiled and cupped his hands. Xiaohua greets Deacon Chu. Although Xiaohua's etiquette was thorough, Chu Yang was not moved. He raised his hand slightly and said, "Come with me." Seeing Chu Yang like this, Xiaohua frowned and said indifferently, "Where is Deacon Chu taking me?" Chu Yang glanced at Xiaohua. His expression was still indifferent. He turned to Chu Jing and said, "Chu Jing, tell Daoist Xiao about my Chu clan's arrangements." "Yes, Grandmaster." Chu Jing agreed and explained to Xiaohua. "Daoist Xiao, you should know that during this period of time, many cultivators have come to the blood pool of gods and devils. My Chu clan doesn't have many disciples to receive them. My Chu clan has a special place to receive the seniors who have been personally invited by my Chu clan's disciples. And for the seniors who don't have a token, my Chu clan also has a place to receive them. But the conditions may be a bit poor." Seeing that Chu Jing didn't dare to say anything, Chu Yang glared at him and said, "There are many cultivators who have come to the blood pool of gods and devils. There are Confucian cultivators, Buddhist disciples and Taoist cultivators. In order to not cause any disputes, my Chu clan has also arranged for Buddhist disciples and Taoist cultivators who don't have tokens to other places." Hearing this, Xiaohua was a bit displeased. Although his temperament was tranquil, and he didn't like fame, he also didn't want to be evaded like this. He originally didn't want to come to the blood pool of gods and devils to join in the fun. But after hearing Song Zixiong and Zhu Cheng's words, he felt that it was reasonable and came over. But he didn't expect that even the patrolling disciples of the Chu clan had a cultivation of third-grade essence energy. This great deacon in front of him was actually an upper fourth-grade essence energy. If a fourth-grade Confucian clan was already like this, then what about second-grade and third-grade clans? The strength of a fifth-grade elemental force that he had displayed was probably not even worthy of their attention. Why would he stick his warm face to their cold butts for no reason? Never mind. Xiaohua waved his hand. Just as he was about to speak, ding ding dong dong, a burst of musical instruments rang out. Everyone looked up and saw that on the left side of the sky, a white cloud with a faint pink color was surging over like a tide. On the cloud, there were several rocks that were nearly 100 zhang in size pulling a large boat over. The sound of the musical instruments came from the large boat. The large boat was flying very fast, but in a moment, it was already close. Xiaohua and the others could clearly see that there was a beautiful lily engraved on the large boat. This lily was shining with a pink brilliance. Countless noble qi came from all directions and rushed into this lily. A majestic and quiet atmosphere was born from this lily, making people feel respect in their hearts. Lilies. Xiaohua frowned slightly, as if he had thought of something. Sure enough, Chu Yang, who was still somewhat absent-minded, looked at the large boat with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He whispered, "Morong clan? Why would they come to the demon god blood pool?" Hearing the words Morong clan, Xiaohua naturally thought of Morong Tsongyan, the mysterious woman that he had only heard of in Star-Picking Pavilion. Actually, until now, Xiaohua still didn't understand Morong Tsongyan's cultivation. He also didn't understand why Morong Tsongyan withdrew from the bidding for the Pegasus. When the large boat of the Morong clan appeared, the originally quiet surroundings of the demon god blood pool suddenly became lively. Many patrolling disciples, who were dressed like Chu Jing, flew over from afar. Some cultivators also flew out from the restriction on the ground. On the other side of the demon god blood pool, several sword lights whistled and rushed to the front of the crowd. When the sword lights appeared, 3 middle-aged Confucian cultivators with 6th-level cultivation appeared. The one in front had a slightly bulging forehead and bright eyes. He stood in midair like a flying sword. Xiaohua originally wanted to leave, but at this moment, a few Chu clan disciples were standing in the air. Although they weren't densely packed, they were clearly a kind of support. Seeing Chu Yang and Chu Jing standing with their hands behind their backs and faces full of respect, Xiaohua knew that it wasn't a good time to leave, so he simply landed on the flying carriage and sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. He would wait for the Morong clan's large boat to land. The Morong clan's flying boat approached, and the surging aura became increasingly dense. This aura was like a mountain that covered the entire side of the demon god blood pool. Even Xiaohua, who was sitting on the flying carriage, felt as if a large stone was pressing down on his heart. He couldn't breathe, not to mention the Chu clan disciples who were only third-level cultivators. Each and every one of them trembled in midair, trying their best not to fall from the sky. Xiaohua frowned slightly and sighed in his heart. He knew that this was a kind of honor for the Morong clan, a first-grade aristocratic family, and a kind of top-down view for the Chu clan, a fourth-grade aristocratic family. I really don't know what the situation will be like when a first-grade aristocratic family's flying boat appears. Seeing that the flying boat had stopped, rosy clouds gushed out from both sides of the boat. The entire front of the flying boat began to turn transparent, and a few women dressed in palace attire holding musical instruments such as zither, chimes, and pipa flew out on colorful clouds. The three Confucian cultivators hurriedly went forward and bowed. Juniors Chu Jianjin, Chu Hong, and Chu Pingjing greet Senior Morong. Juniors didn't know that Senior was coming, so we didn't greet you. We were really negligent. And get up. A very lazy voice came from the flying boat. This old man didn't greet Brother Yoji and came uninvited, so I can't blame you all. Senior, please know that our clan head didn't come to the demon god blood pool. The one in charge today is Martial Uncle Zhongyu. Chu Jianjin respectfully replied. Oh. So it's Brother Zhongyu. That person still didn't show himself. This old man hasn't seen him for 40 years. As he spoke, two eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything fell from the flying boat. They swept through every part of the demon god blood pool faster than divine sense. Senior. Seeing this, Chu Jianjin hurriedly smiled and said, Martial Uncle Zhongyu isn't here right now. According to the message, he will come in 10 days. If Senior is in a hurry, this junior will send a message to Martial Uncle. No need. Following this voice, a young man with a face as white as jade wearing a brocade robe and a jade crown appeared from the flying boat. This young man's face was covered in a layer of light purple divine light, making him look very luxurious. Following the young man was a tall woman. This woman wore a pink robe, and her face was also as white as jade with a faint red halo. Her bright eyes and white teeth made her look like a peach blossom from afar. This old man just happened to pass by and heard that the Chu clan was doing something in the demon god blood pool, so I came to take a look. I have no intention of disturbing the Chu clan, so there's no need to inform them. The young man's figure flew and landed in front of the flying boat. His eyes flashed with multicolored light as he looked at the demon god blood pool with interest. Yes, this junior understands. Chu Jianjin replied in a low voice. He didn't dare say anything else and stood there respectfully. After a while, the young man raised his head and the light in his eyes disappeared. He looked at Chu Jianjin and smiled. Your Chu clan is really generous. It seems you've been paying attention to the demon god blood pool for a long time, right? This is just a small trick. Senior, please don't laugh at us. Chu Jianjin smiled apologetically. Compared to the Morong clan, my Chu clan is really insignificant. Speaking of the demon god chest, the corner of the young man's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. This old man has long heard of it. Now that I have the chance to see its true appearance, this old man can't help but want to stay and take a look. Chu Jianjin's expression slightly changed. Then he smiled and said, if Senior wants to take a look, we'll find the demon god chest in the demon god blood pool and report to the clan head. We'll definitely send the chest to Senior's residence. What? You don't want me to stay? The young man's expression became cold as if he was a bit angry. Chu Jianjin hurriedly said, of course not. Senior misunderstood. Senior is a void refinement and heavenly fusion grandmaster. The demon god blood pool is a dragon's pool and a tiger's den in our eyes, but in your eyes, it's only a blood field. My Chu clan can't wait to welcome Senior's help. How could we not want Senior to stay? Actually, if we knew Senior would come, why would our Chu clan spend so much effort to send out invitations on the hidden immortal continent? Haha, the young man laughed and pointed at Chu Jianjin. You little child, what kind of person do you think this old man is? How could I compete with you juniors for the demon god chess? If I make a move, won't Chu Yin scold me to death in the future? Fine, fine, fine. Since the demon god blood pool is so heavily guarded, I can't even see what's going on. Why would I stay here? Seventh granduncle. Just as the young man waved his sleeves and was about to turn around, the woman beside him said in a low voice, Yin, or wants to stay here and watch the show. The woman's voice wasn't loud, but no one in the sky dared to make a ruckus. Although Xiaohua wasn't close, he could still hear everything clearly. Isn't this Morong Songyan that he saw in Star Picking Tower a long time ago? What's there to see here? The young man was a bit shocked and asked curiously. It's just some blood and devil qi. Now there's also some underworld yin qi. It's true that there are ghosts in this place, but how could there be a demon god chess? Moreover, if there was a demon god chess, how could it be our Chu clan's turn? Granduncle Morong Songyan pulled the young man's sleeve and said coquettishly, Yin are cultivated to the master realm with great difficulty. If I go back this time, Father will definitely make Yin or go into seclusion to break through the bottleneck of qi refinement and spirit return. In the future, I won't be able to go out so easily. Just agree to Yin or no. The young man decisively refused and said indifferently, if it was somewhere else, this old man would agree. But this place is a place where 10,000 years of Yin spirits have settled down. The Yin qi and evil qi are very heavy. It's not appropriate for a little girl like you to stay here. Not only will it affect your newly cultivated realm, it will also be detrimental to your future cultivation. Granduncle Morong Songyan still didn't give up and begged. If you're worried, can't you leave 2 martial uncles to accompany Yin? Moreover, Yin has old friends here. Chapter 38-81. Oh. A trace of surprise appeared on the young man's face. He looked at Morong Songyan in confusion and asked curiously, which old friend of yours is here? Is he a disciple of the Chu clan? Morong Songyan blushed slightly and said with a smile, Granduncle, what are you thinking about? This old friend of mine was just a few decades ago when Yin, or hadn't broken through yet. I made friends with him during my travels. He has never seen Yin er's true appearance. Oh. The young man seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Xiaohua's Pegasus in the distance and said with a smile, this old man remembers. Back then, you said that you wanted to give this old man a Pegasus. Presumably this is it? As he spoke, the young man raised his hand. A wave of awe-inspiring qi suddenly gushed out from Xiaohua's surroundings. It was as if a large hand was grabbing the Pegasus. Although there was a lot of awe-inspiring qi, it accurately separated the flying carriage from the Pegasus. It only pulled the Pegasus towards the young man. The flying carriage didn't move at all. The Pegasus was wrapped in the awe-inspiring qi. It hurriedly flapped its wings, but unfortunately, it couldn't make any waves. The Pegasus panicked. The horn on its forehead began to spin with brilliance. Senior, what are you doing? Xiaohua's indifferent voice came from the flying carriage. Are you bullying the weak and forcefully taking my Pegasus? Following Xiaohua's words, 9 sword lights shot out from the flying chariot and rushed into the awe-inspiring aura like 9 fish. In the blink of an eye, the 9 sword lights flashed and protected the Pegasus. Clang! A loud sword cry came from the awe-inspiring aura. The dazzling sword lights actually made a big hole in the awe-inspiring aura that was holding the Pegasus. Harumph! The Pegasus was overjoyed. It neighed and flapped its light feathers. It turned into a stream of light and flew out of the big hole. The young man's move was naturally more casual, but he didn't expect Xiaohua to break the restriction. He couldn't help but snort. However, when he saw Xiaohua, who was wearing a Taoist robe, he was even more surprised. Xiaohua. Suddenly, the young man seemed to think of something and whispered, He's Xiaohua from Black Wind Mountain? Yin, is this the old friend you were talking about? Hee, that's right, 7th granduncle. Morong Songyan smiled and said, he's the Xiaohua that Yin met in Yu Province's Bronze Pillar Nation's star-picking tower. Yin didn't expect that the unknown Xiaohua would become the famous Xiaohua of the Dao sect. If Yin hadn't seen the image in the jade eyes, Yin wouldn't have believed it. I see. I didn't expect you to have some sort of relationship with him. The young man looked at Morong Songyan meaningfully, as if he finally understood why she wanted to stay here. You come here. The young man raised his head to look at Xiaohua, and called out without any trace of politeness. Xiao Hua stood on top of the flying carriage and saw that the young man's gaze was like a sharp sword that could pierce through him. He knew that this young man was just as Chu Jianjun said. Although he was a great grandmaster, this great grandmaster was a void fusion stage great grandmaster. He was only half a step away from stepping into the realm of sage of literature. In terms of strength, he should be above the 7th level of origin energy, far from what Xiao Hua could compare to. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then moved his body and slowly flew in front of the young man. He bowed and said, Junior Xiao Hua greets Senior Morong. You're that Xiao Hua of the Dao sect? The young man asked. His eyes flashed with a 5-colored brilliance as he looked at Xiao Hua. He was slightly surprised in his heart. At this moment, Xiao Hua's heart moved. He knew that this was an opportunity. He nodded and said, Yes, Junior, is that Xiao Hua? The young man didn't say anything. Suddenly, he raised his right hand and bent his 5 fingers. The awe-inspiring qi in the vicinity of several li was suddenly sucked out. Even in Xiao Hua's eyes, all the brilliance and scenery within a dozen li were grasped by the young man's hand. Woo! Following a muffled sound that sounded like a water buffalo mooing, the young man's fist instantly streaked across the air and hit Xiao Hua's chest. Not good. Xiao Hua felt an indescribable suffocation. He even felt a flash of light and shadow. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. The Zhen Yuan in his body instantly surged, and his entire body rapidly retreated. Xiao Hua was originally an expert in escape techniques. Even if he encountered an opponent of a higher level, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Xiao Hua's wind escape technique could also be considered to have reached the middle level. However, the young man's fist was really too fast. Xiao Hua's body had just moved when the fist had already hit Xiao Hua's body. A huge force was transmitted from the fist. A seemingly endless awe-inspiring qi also violently rushed into Xiao Hua's body. The protective Zhen qi around Xiao Hua's body was shattered. Xiao Hua's figure fell to the ground like a meteorite. However, although the awe-inspiring qi was powerful and the awe-inspiring crystal threads were sharp, they only rushed into Xiao Hua's body for a few inches. They were immediately blocked by Xiao Hua's powerful body. What was special was that when Xiao Hua activated the sword qi around his body, the sword qi rushed out from the surface of his body. The awe-inspiring qi that could destroy a mountain peak was also blocked by Xiao Hua's sword qi. Damn it, too fast. Xiao Hua's body flashed with intense brilliance. His figure fell rapidly, but he was still amazed in his heart. Not to mention this distance of several zhang, even if it was a few li, his fist would still arrive in a flash. The literary sage is really the literary sage. Xiao Hua was like a meteorite. Not only was there a brilliance around his body, but there was also a strange whistling sound. There was even some mist faintly coming out from the brilliance. Boom! With a loud sound, Xiao Hua's figure crashed into the ground. The entire ground shook violently, and a deep pit of several zhang in size appeared on the ground. Seeing that Xiao Hua was hit by him without any power to fight back and crashed into the ground as he expected, the young man's expression didn't change. However, after a moment, the sword qi on Xiao Hua's body was like a hedgehog, dissolving his power. Even under the clear eyes technique, he didn't see Xiao Hua injured. The young man couldn't help but be surprised. He whispered, Huh? This little kid is a bit strange. 7th Granduncle Morong Tsongyan saw the young man make a move, and was slightly startled. She hurriedly whispered, Xiao Hua is just before she could finish speaking. Shua like a gust of wind. Xiao Hua's figure suddenly flew out from the ground and landed in front of her. Although he looked a bit embarrassed, it was enough to shock Morong Tsongyan. You're actually fine? Morong Tsongyan asked in surprise. He hurriedly checked Xiao Hua's injuries. Many thanks for Senior's mercy. Xiao Hua bowed to the young man, and then nodded to Morong Tsongyan with a smile. Many thanks for Miss Morong's concern. Senior Morong only wanted to test my strength. If he really wanted to make a move, how could I be here talking to Miss? The young man saw that Xiao Hua was so relaxed and narrowed his eyes. He thoughtfully nodded and said, Black Wind Mountains. Xiao Hua actually knows the sword qi of us Confucian cultivators. This is not only beyond this old man's expectations, but also beyond the Immortal Palace's expectations. Xiao Hua smiled and took advantage of the situation to respectfully say, It's not that Junior didn't want to reveal my Confucian cultivation. It's just that the Immortal Palace is too overbearing. They didn't give Junior a chance to speak at all. Not only did they set up an inescapable net, they even clamored for Junior to cripple his own cultivation and accept his punishment with the Immortal Palace. If it was a powerful expert like Senior, Junior naturally wouldn't dare to resist. But facing the immortal generals of the Immortal Palace, how could Junior just stand there and wait to be captured? Before Junior could use the sword chi of Confucian cultivators, they collapsed. Even if Junior wanted to let the Immortal Palace know that Junior has the sword chi of Confucian cultivators, I'm afraid Junior doesn't have the chance. Huh. Little child, you're right. The young man laughed. The Immortal Palace is used to being bossy and domineering. How could they talk to you nicely? Since you can take a punch from this old man and come out unscathed, that bullshit true monarch Qing Yuan is nothing more than a loyal lackey of the immortal emperor. Speaking of strength, how could he be your opponent? Xiaohua modestly said. Junior is just a lonely duckweed in the hidden immortal continent. How could Junior dare to compare with the great general of the Sun Palace? Forget it. This old man is Morong Jiang, remember this. The young man waved his hand and said with a smile, nowadays, it's rare to have a cultivator like you who's proficient in both Taoism and Confucianism on the hidden immortal continent. Today I have something to do, so I won't stay here for long. When Yin returns to the Morong family, you can come with him. This old man is very optimistic about you. Is that so? Xiaohua's face lit up. He bowed and said, Junior thanks Senior Morong. Haha. While Morong Jiang was laughing, his figure flashed in the air. While his voice and smiling face were still in the air, Morong Jiang's figure had already landed on the big boat. Looking at the palace maid and the boy who flew out earlier, they once again played their musical instruments and flew towards the big boat. Seeing that everyone from the Morong family had boarded the big boat, leaving only Morong Songyun behind, Xiaohua understood that this was Morong Jiang's real test for him. If he could protect Morong Songyun in the blood pool of gods and devils, he would be able to obtain the protection of the Morong family. However, what surprised Xiaohua was that Morong Songyun's face slightly changed. When he saluted the big boat, his lips actually moved slightly, as if he was sending a sound transmission. If Xiaohua wasn't very close to Morong Songyun, he might not have noticed this change in expression. Sure enough, after Morong Songyun saluted, another figure flew down from the big boat. It was an old man. 14th Uncle Morong Songyun greeted with a smile. Thank you for accompanying Yin'er here. Humph, you only know how to cause trouble. The old man glared at Morong Songyun, as if he was scolding him. However, his expression didn't seem like one. Xiaohua helplessly saluted again and said, Junior Xiaohua greets Senior. Get up. This old man is Morong Junpeng. I am Yin'er's uncle. After the old man finished scolding Morong Songyun, he turned to Xiaohua and said, This old man has also heard of nephew Zhao's fame of killing the immortal soldiers of the Immortal Palace. It is indeed satisfying. Chapter 3882. Morong Junpeng looked around and activated the paperweight to open the door. He looked at Xiaohua and smiled. If nephew Xiao doesn't mind, why don't you come with us? This old man may have some matters to discuss with you. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said, Although Senior Morong asked me to protect Miss Morong, with Senior here, there is no need for me to do anything. I will ask the Chu family to set up a small pavilion. If Senior needs anything, feel free to inform me. And Morong Junpeng didn't force him. He glanced at Morong Songyun and flew into the pavilion. Morong Songyun smiled sweetly at Xiaohua and also flew in. Soon after, Xiaohua called over 2 Chu clan disciples and also set up a small pavilion. Then he also flew inside. This was a very exquisite pavilion, no different from the usual ones. However, there were faint flashes of dark clouds everywhere in this pavilion, and inscriptions were faintly discernible. Xiaohua sat in the main hall and looked around. He didn't find anything strange, but he still cautiously took out a jade talisman and set up a simple formation. He then sat on a chair and frowned. Master, after a while, Fujiwen said in a low voice, Do you really want the Morong family's protection? If not, you must tell them as soon as possible, otherwise there will be endless troubles. Fu Jiwen knew that his master's cultivation was unfathomable, but sometimes he didn't understand the rules of the hidden immortal continent, so he reminded him in a low voice. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Do you think I want to rely on the Morong family? Do I need to rely on the Morong family? That's true. Fu Jiwen nodded. But master, if you don't plan to do so, you must tell Morong Songyan as soon as possible. Otherwise, if the Morong family misunderstands, it will be difficult for master. The Immortal Palace is in charge of Confucian affairs, so they might not put master in their eyes, but the Morong family won't. If they get angry, they will definitely keep an eye on master. Not only will it be difficult for master to continue cultivating, the Fortune Gates matters will also be leaked. At that time, it will be a disaster. AI, do you think master is willing? Xiaohua bitterly smiled. This Morong family suddenly appeared, and Morong Songyan also recognized master's Pegasus. Who knows what she was thinking, insisting on master staying behind. Especially that Morong Jiang. The moment they met, he immediately tried to probe. He was a 7th level Origin Energy Grandmaster, half a step away from becoming a sage of literature. Since master wanted to form alliances, he naturally had to make friends with such an expert. But who would have thought that? He would actually want me to follow Morong Songyan back to the Morong family. This kind of obvious solicitation. I don't dare to reject him in front of his face. Looks like we can only take one step at a time. Of course, Fu Jiwen also knew Xiaohua's awkwardness, so he smiled and said, maybe Martial Uncle Morong has a good impression of master, TSK. Would you even believe what you just said? Xiaohua sneered. You're just a little son of the Fu family, yet you have to think for the Fu family. Morong Songyun's marriage is something she can decide on her own? Hee, that's true. Fu Jiwen smiled cheekily. Why don't we elope? Since master has already offended the Immortal Palace, there's no need to be afraid of offending the Morong family. Wouldn't it be easy to leave the hidden immortal continent and fly away together? Pa Xiaohua angrily hit Fu Jiwen's head and scolded. Why don't you elope with Bian? It's not that disciple doesn't want to, but disciple doesn't have the ability to attract bees and butterflies. Just seeing disciple once is enough to make people think of disciple. Fu Jiwen replied in a serious manner, but his words were not serious at all. Xiaohua angrily said, how can there be such a shameless disciple who dares to talk to master like that? Do you still want to cultivate or not? Yes, disciple was wrong. Fu Jiwen hurriedly pulled a long face. You still know that you were wrong. Xiaohua was even more annoyed. He coldly snorted and said, do you think that Morong Songyan calling me master is a good thing? Why do I feel that there's something strange about it? Yes, disciple also thinks so. Fu Jiwen obviously didn't see the change in Morong Songyan's expression. He was just being perfunctory. No, how can master allow himself to be captured without putting up a fight? It's better to take the initiative. Xiaohua promptly stood up from his seat and said, master is going out for a walk. Are you coming with master? Or do you want to return to the Kunlun mirror to cultivate? Disciple is naturally willing to return to the Kunlun mirror to cultivate. Fu Jiwen said with a smile. Although disciple's cultivation is higher than Lu Yi and the others, these junior brothers are all abnormal. Disciple also wants to make the best use of his time. Xiaohua knew that his disciples were all gifted. Not to mention that Wu Tian was stronger than Fu Jiwen. Even Chang Yuan and Yu Zhongquan's cultivation wasn't too far off from Fu Jiwen's. Lu Yi, Wang Bianfei, and Yuan Yu couldn't compare to Fu Jiwen. But the three of them had endless potential. Now they were like dragons trapped in the sea. Their cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. As long as Fu Jiwen slacked off, in less than 100 years, the three of them would surpass Fu Jiwen. Forget it. Go back and cultivate. Xiaohua said with a smile. This place is indeed dangerous. Wait for master to go out and call you out. After sending Fu Jiwen back to the space, Xiaohua walked out of the pavilion and called the disciples of the Chu family to ask them. After confirming that there were no obstructions within the restriction, he slowly flew towards the demonic god's blood pool. After flying for a while, Xiaohua stopped in midair. The closer he got to the demonic god's blood pool, the more powerful the pressure on his mind became. The feeling that originally attracted Xiaohua gradually weakened. The blood sea that was only 10,000 li away seemed to be endless under this pressure. A feeling of being an ant involuntarily emerged in his heart. What is this blood sea? Looking at the engraved blood traces that were constantly changing, Xiaohua knew that the raging waves in the blood sea were far from what he had imagined. Xiaohua couldn't help but ponder. If it's the Netherworld's blood sea, then it doesn't have the Netherworld's qi. If it's something from the demon realm, then it also doesn't have the demon realm's qi. However, whether it's the Netherworld's qi or the demon realm's qi, this Xiao should be able to sense it. In particular, according to the disciples of the Chu family, the demonic god's blood pool had a strange change a month ago because of the 100 Ghosts parade. If I say that it has nothing to do with the Netherworld's qi, who would believe me? Thinking, Xiaohua urged his figure to fly along the edge of the demonic god's blood pool, then continued to fly forward. Within the Chu family's barrier, there were many pavilions, but the demonic god's blood pool's aura was very strong, so there weren't many cultivators moving around within the barrier. Even if there were some Confucian cultivators who came out to explore like Xiaohua, when these people saw Xiaohua, they all avoided him and were unwilling to meet face to face with him. After flying for a while, Xiaohua saw that there really wasn't anything special. The barrier of the demonic god's blood pool was very firm, and he couldn't see any flaws. Just as he was about to return, on a protruding cliff, Xiaohua saw an unfamiliar person sitting there blankly, staring at the demonic god's blood pool in front of him. He didn't know what he was thinking. Wasn't this person the head deacon Chu Yang who had greeted Xiaohua before? Xiaohua looked around and didn't see any disciples of the Chu family. There weren't even any pavilions in the surroundings. Xiaohua followed Chu Yang's gaze and stared at the demonic god's blood pool for a long time, but he still didn't see any clues. After thinking for a while, Xiaohua flew up the cliff and stood on the left side. He cupped his hands and said, "Immortal friend Chu, this Xiao greets you." Who would have thought that Chu Yang didn't seem to hear him, and only looked at the demonic god's blood pool without replying. Xiaohua also felt strange, so he simply stood there and looked at the demonic god's blood pool. The waves of blood in the demonic god's blood pool were still the same as before, wantonly fluttering and swaying at will, without any rules or direction. Strands of black flames that suddenly appeared also didn't have any fixed trajectory. They suddenly appeared along with the waves of blood, then were extinguished by the waves of blood. One after another, they seemed to be endless. Perhaps after half an hour, Chu Yang suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Do you think this demonic god's blood pool is living happily?" What? Xiaohua was stunned. He almost doubted his own ears and blurted out this question. This black qi wave is obviously different from the demonic god's blood pool, so why did it desperately appear and mix with the demonic god's blood pool? In just a few breaths, the demonic god's blood pool was extinguished and disappeared. You say, in this short period of time, what do you think it wants? Xiaohua touched his nose and asked very strangely. This Xiao isn't a demonic god's blood pool, nor is it black qi. I'm afraid it's not easy to guess what they're thinking. If you want to know, you can go in and ask. You're right. Guessing outside. In the end, it's just guessing and not the truth. The most important thing is to go in and ask. Chu Yang muttered almost to himself. Xiaohua looked at this very strange person and smiled as he cupped his hands and said, "This Xiao won't delay immortal friend Chu's enlightenment any longer. Goodbye." But at this moment, Chu Yang asked very abruptly, "Then what do you think people live for?" Ah. Xiaohua was slightly stunned and stood there blankly for a moment. This sentence was like a bolt of lightning that struck him. Yes, what do people live for? Xiaohua muttered to himself, but his heart was like a raging sea. From time to time, some strange scenes would appear in his mind. It was as if Xiaohua had also thought about this question before. Or perhaps these scenes were some of Xiaohua's memories from before. Of course, at this moment, Xiaohua's primordial spirit was very strong. He was comprehending the heavenly Tao, and also comprehending karma. He was cultivating Taoist techniques, and also familiar with scriptures. His chest was filled with an awe-inspiring aura, and his blood also refined a strange demonic aura. He wouldn't be stumped by this extremely simple question, even though it was full of philosophy. However, he still took a deep breath and said to this Chu clan disciple in front of him who had a whole new level of respect. Perhaps I don't know why other people live. However, this Xiao is well aware of the reason why I'm alive. Oh. Chu Yang rolled his eyes and looked at Xiaohua. His eyes were still flickering with doubt. What do you live for? Chapter 3883. I live so that some people can live better lives. Xiaohua said word by word. My life was saved by the person I love, and also by the person who cares about me. I live so that I won't let their deaths down. If I live, they will have a chance to live. If I die, they won't live either. If I live, I can let more people live. Let them see the sun tomorrow. Let them eat food to fill their stomachs. You live really nobly, really great. Chu Yang's eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule. I don't know how many sanctimonious people have said these words. But after these people said these words, they turned around and did something that angered both men and gods, and did something that offended the heavens and reason. Maybe others do, but I don't. Although Xiaohua didn't know why Chu Yang said this, he still answered sincerely. If you just think like this, what sunlight is there in this world? What is there to be reluctant to leave in this world? Yes, I just feel that there is nothing in this world to be reluctant to leave. Chu Yang nodded, and looked at Shuizhe again. It can't be. Xiaohua stared blankly, sizing up Chu Yang from head to toe. He didn't quite understand. No matter what, this Chu Yang was still a grandmaster who was around the 4th level of elemental energy. Since he had cultivated to such a level, how could he have such an outrageous idea? What Immortal Chu said is really ridiculous. Xiaohua said with a smile. Since the day we started cultivating, we were under the control of Confucian cultivators. Every time we made some progress in cultivation, we would be persecuted by Confucian cultivators. We went through a lot of trouble to cultivate to the Yuanying level, but in the end, we were still killed by the Immortal Palace. We didn't even complain about such a tragic fate. Every day, we had to work hard to gather energy into our bodies, refine our meridians, and raise our babies. Immortal Chu Yang was born in a Confucian family, and you had cultivation methods, medicinal pills, and Confucian classics. You were more than 100 times more fortunate than us Taoist cultivators. What are you doubting? My pain isn't your pain. How do you know? Chu Yang replied indifferently. These words made Xiaohua choke. However, Xiaohua thought for a moment and still said, a mayfly's life is born at sunrise and dies at sunset. Although it's short, it's still a walk in the world. Since one would leave a mark in this world, then the 6 paths reincarnation would surely record it as well. I might not know what a mayfly can do in its lifetime, but since humans can live longer than mayflies, why can't humans do more? People of the secular world gave birth to children, opened up wastelands, and farmed. They were either mediocre, or their names were passed down through the ages. They were still alive. Being alive might not have any meaning, but if they were not alive, then there was no meaning at all. Since we can set foot on the path of cultivation and become cultivators, let alone Confucian cultivators, Taoist sects, and Buddhist sects, they all have their own divine abilities. These divine abilities are not for showing off, but to let us live better, to let us use these divine abilities, to let others live better. Although Xiaohua's eloquence was not as good as Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's or Buddha Bodhi's, he was still able to talk nonstop. However, no matter how much Xiaohua said, Chu Yang was still indifferent. He looked at the blood waves indifferently, and did not say another word. Forget it. Xiaohua said a lot and felt his mouth and tongue dry. He stopped and said, I'm afraid it's not easy for me to explain this profound truth of life. If fate allows it in the future, I'll ask a senior monk of Buddhist sects to explain it to you. No need. Chu Yang did not turn his head and said in a low voice, in my life, other than my parents who patiently explained these things to me, no one else could explain this question so deeply. It's not a coincidence that you could cultivate to such a level. Moreover, I also believe that your future prospects are incomparably brilliant. While they were talking, a palm-sized flying crane landed from a distance and stopped right next to Xiaohua. Chu Yang turned his head and looked at the lilies on the flying crane. He said, Miss Morong is calling you. You should go quickly. If you're interested, Come here 3 days later at this time. I'll tell you some secrets. Okay. Xiao Hua grabbed the flying crane and opened it to take a look. He nodded and said, I'll definitely come at that time. Xiao Hua flew away. Chu Yang still did not move. He stood there like a senior monk meditating. There are strange people every year, but there are especially many this year. Xiao Hua laughed secretly while flying. If this question was asked by a 10 or 20-year-old youth, it would be understandable. This Chu Yang has lived for who knows how many years. Why is he still distressed over this? This is really unimaginable. Could it be that this Chu Yang has some unknown pain and secret? Thinking about this, Xiao Hua unconsciously looked forward to the appointment 3 days later. The palace that Murong Junping and Murong Songyun were in was very eye-catching. Xiao Hua found it without much effort. After entering the palace, he found out that the Chu family had sent the Jade Eye Scroll over while he was away. Inside it was a detailed record of the plan to find the demon god chest in the demonic god blood pool. Of course there were some details, but all of them were just guesses. They could only be used as a reference. Xiao Hua removed the jade eyes from his forehead and handed it back to Murong Songyun. He said, When I came here before, I had some thoughts. But since Senior Murong has entrusted me with this task, I will definitely put Miss Murong's safety first. I don't care about these details. Haha, Xiao Hua. Murong Junpeng was very satisfied with Xiao Hua's words. He smiled and said, This time, the Chu clan is looking for the demon chest in the god and devil blood pool with great fanfare. Not to mention that the demon chest is only an imperial weapon. It can at most be considered one of the top 10 imperial weapons. And these 10 imperial weapons are nothing but a joke in the eyes of scholarly cultivator clans like us. Therefore, there are many scholarly cultivators coming to the god and devil blood pool, but there are very few 4th class and above disciples. 7th granduncle came here purely out of curiosity. He didn't have any intention of interfering. Yinner didn't stay here to cause trouble. Rather, 7th granduncle found something strange after looking at the god and devil blood pool. So he let Yinner stay. Of course, 7th granduncle also saw that your skills were extraordinary. So he took advantage of the situation to let you protect Yun. Therefore, although these details aren't important, we still have to pay attention to them and carefully deal with them. Only then can we expose the Chu clan's cover-up. Xiao Hua was shocked. He finally understood the change in expression on Murong Songyun's face. There were so many secrets behind this. Xiao Hua bitterly smiled and said, Senior, this isn't this forcing a duck onto a perch? Junior really didn't think so much. Since Senior Murong wants to investigate, why don't you sneak into the god and devil blood pool and take a look? Making us come. How can it be as convenient as him? You think 7th granduncle doesn't want to. You think I'm willing to take the risk. Murong Songyun curled his lips and said, This god and devil blood pool is now covered by the Chu clan's formation. If 7th granduncle enters, he will inevitably be discovered by the Chu clan. Moreover, the god and devil blood pool itself is extremely powerful. Even with 7th granduncle's ability, he doesn't dare to take the risk. 7th granduncle saw that your Taoist body tempering technique is very powerful, so he let you stay here with the excuse of protecting me. Protecting me is secondary. Finding out the truth is the most important. Xiao Hua's mouth was somewhat bitter. He had guessed a lot before, but he didn't expect that the reality was even more bizarre than his guesses. The Chu clan's true goal of finding treasures in the god and devil blood pool was far from what he could achieve. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua said, Sai, Senior Murong really thinks too highly of me. Although I'm a Taoist body cultivator, how can it be compared to Senior's void fusion stage subbody? Yun already told 7th granduncle about this situation. Otherwise, 7th granduncle wouldn't have let me come. Murong Junpeng said with a smile. What 7th granduncle means is that you just have to do your best. Regardless of success or failure, this is a merit. 7th granduncle can also speak up for you in front of the clan head. After all, this risks offending the immortal palace. 7th granduncle can't just casually make a decision. All right, this junior understands. Xiao Hua nodded. Let's discuss the details of the jade eyes again. It might not be completely foolproof. Good. Murong Junpeng said with a smile. That's how it should be. Then Murong Tsongyun placed the jade eyes on Ryu's forehead and carefully read the details inside. Murong Junpeng also combined what he knew and slowly added. Unknowingly, 3 days passed by very quickly. Seeing that the details of this treasure hunt were correct, even if the Chu clan made any strange movements, they would be able to calmly deal with it. Xiaohua stood up and said, "At this point, we should still go and take a look. If it's inconvenient for the two of you, I'll go myself." "And this old man has the same idea," Murong Junpeng said with a smile. "Once we go out, the Chu clan will definitely have spies following us. They won't be able to find anything. It's better for this old man to go. I'll definitely report everything that fellow immortal Xiao has done to 7th granduncle." Murong Tsongyun looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, "However, you have to be careful. I still want you to accompany me back to Murong Mountain Manor." The beautiful woman smiled beautifully. If true feelings entered the eyes, the beautiful woman was concerned. If true feelings entered the heart, Xiaohua's heart swayed. He said loudly, "Jinxiao, don't worry. I'll definitely bring you back to Murong Mountain Manor safely. I believe in you." Murong Tsongyun faintly smiled and sent Xiaohua out of the hall. However, just as Xiaohua left, Murong Junpeng activated the origin formation in the hall and said faintly, "Yin'er, you shouldn't have pulled Xiaohua in. I feel that this Xiaohua is a bit strange. I'm afraid it will have some effect on your test this time." 14th granduncle, can you blame Yin'er? Murong Tsongyun sneered and said, "The clan only sent 2 uncles to protect Yin'er. Yin'er can't guarantee that he will be able to escape unscathed from such a powerful demonic god blood pool. Yin'er only saw a Taoist cultivator and felt that he was somewhat useful, so I wanted to borrow some external strength. In the end, 7th granduncle immediately sent 14th granduncle alone. Now even if Xiaohua is a bit strange, what can this boy do?" Chapter 3884. This is the clan's test for you. Murong Junpeng smiled bitterly and said, "How could you go through so many twists and turns? Now I've also been pulled in by you." Xiaohua didn't know that there were so many secrets of the Murong clan. He had already flown to the cliff and was waiting to inquire about the secrets of the Chu clan. He was still wondering if he could find out the true purpose of the Chu clan from Chu Yang's mouth. "Xiaohua, have you seen with your own eyes how your parents were wrongly accused and died under the family law?" Chu Yang asked Xiaohua the moment he saw him. Xiaohua was startled. He shook his head and said, "I'm a Dao cultivator, not a Confucian clan. I've never had such a cruel experience." But then Xiaohua comforted Chu Yang and said, "I sympathize with your experience, but it's all in the past. You still have to think about your parents' advice and live for yourself." "I haven't either." Chu Yang ignored Xiaohua and said again. Xiaohua was startled. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know how to respond. "But I've seen it." Chu Yang didn't need Xiaohua to answer. He continued, "I have a younger cousin named Chu Nan. He's about the same age as me. When we were both 10 years old, his parents and mine were wronged at the same time. But in the end, his parents were executed by the clan's rules, while mine survived." Speaking until here, Chu Yang hesitated. Xiaohua didn't ask and just listened quietly. "I was very happy at first, but also sad for Chu Nan. I often comforted him. Even my parents want to adopt Chu Nan and raise him as their own. But not long after, Chu Nan no longer paid attention to me, and also no longer paid attention to my parents. The matter of adoption was also put aside. At first, I was very surprised and always wanted to find him. After all, Chu Nan and I grew up together. But Chu Nan always avoided me. Even if he couldn't avoid me, he would still look at me coldly and treat me as an enemy. After a period of time, I finally heard some rumors and understood why Chu Nan hated me. Because when my parents and his parents were wronged, his parents did not give in and spoke the truth. My parents bowed and bent their knees, and even pushed the blame to my parents who heard it. The result is obvious. Those who submit live, and those who are upright die. Actually, Xiaohua couldn't help but say, sometimes people have no choice but to give in, be it for yourself, or for your child. However, Xiaohua also felt that his tone was very weak and couldn't prove anything. That's not the most important part. Chu Yang shook his head and said, the key point is that Chu Nan didn't live for long. During one of his training, he coincidentally died in an accident. This accident was too unexpected. Even I felt that it was a coincidence, but no one asked about it. I asked my parents about it, but all I got in return was a slap. So from then on, I've been thinking about what people live for. For justice? For the sake of living? For the family? Or for myself? Chu Yang was almost muttering to himself. I don't understand. My parents can't answer me either. Many people in the clan even think of me as a lunatic. Before I entered the 5th grade of Origin Energy, I often went to the hidden immortal continent to gain experience. I've seen countless people's ugly faces, and I've also seen many righteous and kind people. However, I didn't see any meaning in them. Not to mention those evil people. They are purely selfish and deserve to die. Even among those kind people, how many of them are sanctimonious? How many of them are fishing for fame? From them, I only see selfish desires. Actually, not to mention them, even I feel that I'm ugly. I don't want to cultivate, but if I don't cultivate, I can't live in the clan. I have no choice but to cultivate. But in order to cultivate, I have no choice but to flatter others against my will and do things that I don't want to do. Is this the meaning of living? Actually, if I lived like this, I might not be able to live until today. I'm afraid that I would have died long ago. The reason why I lived, at first, was to avenge Chu Nan. Then was to avenge my parents. Chu Yang's eyes flashed with a sharp and ruthless light. In the end, my parents couldn't escape from that person's evil clutches. 20 years later, when no one in the clan was paying attention to that matter, that person finally made his move. Although that person did it very secretly, I clearly know that it was that person who did it. Since then, I have been very careful and never gave that person the slightest chance. And I also racked my brains to raise my cultivation, to find a chance of survival from that person's evil clutches. Xiaohua, tell me, what meaning can there be in living like this? By chance, I made a great contribution to the clan, and received a reward to enter the treasure room, to find a secret technique to cultivate. I obtained a secret technique called the Life and Death Talisman from the secret stone slab. Do you know what the Life and Death Talisman is? It was a situation where one could neither live nor die, and one could only seek a breakthrough between life and death. In order to cultivate, I was in a state of indifference between life and death every day, suffering and pain. It's just that while I was cultivating, that person was also improving. Although his improvement wasn't as fast as mine, his strength was originally stronger than mine. After so many years, even though I had already stepped into the 5th grade of Essence Energy, I still couldn't catch up to him. I originally thought that as long as I had the Life and Death Talisman technique, I would catch up to him sooner or later, and behead him under my sword. But until 30 years ago, when the sword energy in my dantian started to show signs of going out of control, I suddenly realized that the Life and Death Talisman wasn't a perfect technique. At the end of cultivation, the sword energy would eventually break free from my control, and my entire body would be engulfed by this sword energy. The so-called Life and Death Talisman is a talisman that turns life into death. It's a secret technique that uses the body to refine talismans. Xiaohua, up until now, do you know the despair and disappointment in my heart? Even if it's God, he won't let me live a good life. He's so biased towards that evil person, so jealous of good people. In this world, is there still justice? Is there still fairness? This Xiaohua was really speechless. All the comforting words in front of Chu Yang's bitter experience were pale and powerless, and turned into mere words. Perhaps this Xiao can help you perfect your technique. Xiaohua thought for a moment, and then suggested in a low voice. If it was 30 years ago, this Chu might have listened to these words. Chu Yang sighed and said, but 30 years later, these words are meaningless. Not to mention that this sword energy is getting harder and harder to control. This Chu's doubts are enough to crush this Chu. However, this Chu still wants to thank you, Xiaohua. You're the first person in this world to hear this Chu's inner thoughts. Now that this Chu has said these words, I don't have any trace of attachment. This Chu has countless regrets in this life, countless doubts, but at the last moment, I don't have any more regrets. This Chu is very gratified. He Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said with a smile. Can you tell this Xiao who your enemy is? Perhaps this Xiao can join hands with you to kill him? Haha, if these words came from Morongjang's mouth, this Chu would believe it, but if it came from you, how can this Chu believe it? Chu Yang laughed and said, but who is this person? You should have seen him before. He has a sanctimonious face. Other than me, who would know what kind of outrageous things he has done in the past? I've seen him before? Xiaohua was stunned, and immediately realized. He asked curiously, could it be that you're talking about Chu Jianjin? Haha, right, Chu Jianjin is such an unyielding name. Why is it occupied by such a villain? Why can't this name make him do some righteous things? Chu Yang laughed, then stood up, and looked around without any reluctance. He said again, this kind of person lives freely in this world. How can there be a way for us to live in this world? Forget it, after persisting for thousands of years, in the end, I still have to walk this path. I only hope that the 6 paths of reincarnation that Buddhism talks about really exists. This Chu doesn't want to be a human after reincarnation. As he spoke, the sword light around Chu Yang's body uncontrollably rushed out, and his whole body rushed towards the distant devil god blood pool. Sigh, this is really inexplicable. Xiaohua looked at Chu Yang's flying figure. He was at a complete loss. He and Chu Yang were neither relatives nor friends. But Chu Yang had said so many strange things in front of him, and he wanted to commit suicide in front of him. This was one of the most inexplicable things that Xiaohua had ever encountered in his life. However, seeing Chu Yang rush into the restriction, Xiaohua couldn't help but raise his hand to grab, and instantly imprison the space around Chu Yang. Although Chu Yang's cultivation was at the 5th level of essence energy, if he wanted to commit suicide in front of Xiaohua, it was still somewhat difficult. Buzz just when Xiaohua was about to confine the space, a rumbling sound suddenly came from Chu Yang's chest. A bowl-sized Buddha's light was emitted from the source of the sound. Layers upon layers of golden swan and I turned into a heavenly dragon, and flew out. A huge force was sucked in from the source of Xiaohua's magic power. A sudden change occurred, and before Xiaohua could understand, the suction force enveloped Xiaohua's whole body. The true essence in his meridians left his body uncontrollably, and fell into Chu Yang's body. Not only that, even the space that Xiaohua had previously imprisoned was now fragmented, and turned into fragments that fell into the Buddha light. Oh, not good. At this time, how could Xiaohua not know that he had fallen into Chu Yang's trap? That golden and Aihua's Buddha light was to make him activate his true essence? Xiaohua shouted, and lightning appeared around his body, and his figure retreated quickly. However, although Xiaohua's figure retreated quickly, the lightning was immediately pulled into the Buddha light as soon as it appeared. Moreover, the more Xiaohua struggled, the stronger the suction force of the Buddha light became. Xiaohua hurriedly felt as if his whole body was going to be sucked into the Buddha light. Strength of mountains. Xiaohua was shocked, and he didn't dare to think too much about the disappearance of his true essence. He hurriedly formed a Buddha seal with his hands, and with a shout, he hit the Buddha light. Chapter 3885. Boom! The Buddha's light flashed slightly, and the suction force weakened slightly. Xiaohua seized this opportunity, and with the help of the fire escape technique, he suddenly disappeared from his original place. Just as Xiaohua disappeared, that Buddha's light extended more than 100 feet in the direction of Xiaohua's escape. Fortunately, Xiaohua's escape technique was good, otherwise he would still be dragged in by this Buddha's light. Damn it! Xiaohua's figure flashed from several hundred feet away. Seeing that Buddha's light was like a big hand grabbing at nothing, it immediately withdrew after missing, and he couldn't help but curse. How can this Chu Yang be a Buddhist disciple? That Buddha's light fell back to Chu Yang's chest and immediately disappeared. As for Chu Yang's figure that had rushed into the restriction, it also froze in midair. And at this time, the left half of Chu Yang's body gave birth to a gloomy black sword light. This sword light began to rapidly rotate on the left side of the Buddha's light. In contrast, the right side of Chu Yang's body gave birth to a brilliant silver-white sword light. This sword light was rotating just like the left side, but the direction was completely different. Looking at the place where the Buddha's light disappeared again, A strange talisman was emitting a familiar Dao magical power fluctuation from top to bottom. Streams of blood-red liquid were slowly extracted from Chu Yang's body in this fluctuation, and divided into two halves, falling into the left and right black and silver white sword light. His Xiaohua looked at this strange scene, and also sensed the gloomy and cold aura in the void. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. What happened in the end? Is Chu Yang going to commit suicide? Or does the Buddhist sect want to destroy the restriction? Or does the Dao sect cultivators want to provoke a war between immortals and Buddhas? Why is it that the more I look at it, the more I don't understand? In the few breaths of Xiaohua's hesitation, two muffled sounds were heard. Chu Yang's body was split into two halves by the talisman. Half of his flesh fell into the dark sword light on the left, and the other half fell into the brilliant silver sword light on the right. Humans are humans, what is life? Ghosts are ghosts, what is death? Life as a human is difficult to understand. Death as a ghost is even more worrying. Chu Yang's voice was very faint. It sounded like the cry of a ghost. Why don't we turn it into a life and death talisman, and wash away the shame of the Chu clan? Buzz buzz. As soon as Chu Yang's words fell, the two rotating sword beams emitted a huge roar. The Dao talisman in the middle also seeped into the sword beams. Looking from a distance, the two linked sword beams looked like a concentric knot. It also looked like a Dao talisman. It also looked like a pair of yin and yang eyes, observing all the ugliness in the world of the living and the underworld. Not good. Xiaohua was shocked. Without thinking, he waved his hand. Dozens of crystal threads that looked like dragons appeared around the life and death talisman, trying to destroy it. However, as soon as the crystal threads appeared, the life and death talisman shot out two sword rays. They twisted in the air, and all the crystal threads were broken. The life and death talisman produced a suction force that swept away all the crystal threads, not allowing the crystal threads to release their power. The crystal thread entered the life and death talisman, causing it to expand by another 30%. Then, it shot toward the Godfiend blood pool at lightning speed. Damn it! Just as Xiaohua was cursing, a dark light flashed around his body. Just as he raised the wishful staff, a similar curse came from a distance. Immediately, a sword beam that was several feet thick flew down like a waterfall. The sword energy was so oppressive that even Xiaohua hurriedly dodged. Looking at the distance again, Chu Jianjing rushed over with a shocked and angry expression. Boom! Chu Jianjing's sword beam was so powerful that it seemed like everything within 100 feet would be annihilated. But strangely, when the sword beam fell into the life and death talisman, the life and death talisman let out a huge roar again. It involuntarily expanded by several times. The sword beam cut through the void, and the barrier shrouded by sword energy could not stop the life and death talisman from rushing into the Godfiend blood pool's restriction. Puff! A very soft sound, like a child blowing air, was heard. The life and death talisman fell on the transparent barrier. No, Chu Jianjing's eyes were wide open. He shouted and stretched out his right hand. 5 sword beams flew out from his fingers and grabbed the life and death talisman on the barrier. Unfortunately, just as the 5 sword beams flew out 10 feet, the blood light in the middle of the life and death talisman disappeared in an instant. The silver-white rotating sword beam merged with the dark sword beam. Boom! This time, the sound was very loud. A huge gray sword flew out from the life and death talisman, and penetrated the Godfiend blood pool's barrier. Gotcha! Like a chicken's shell cracking, the crack instantly spread across the entire barrier. Countless waves of blood mixed with black flames flowed out like egg white. Xiaohua! You evil path! What are you doing? Chu Jianjing roared and looked at Xiaohua angrily. Xiaohua sneered. Can't you see what I'm doing? This is your Chu family's secret technique, the life and death talisman. This sword beam is also your Chu family's. What does it have to do with me? How do you know this is the life and death talisman? How do you know that this sword beam is Chu family's? Chu Jianjing shouted. Could it be that you are colluding with someone from Chu family? You want to destroy my Chu family's search for the Godfiend chess? If you don't give me an explanation today. Xiaohua, what's going on? The commotion here had already alarmed everyone. Everyone flew out from the pavilion. Murong Songyun's anxious voice came from afar. You. Could it be that you, seeing that the blood wave had already rushed out of the barrier, Chu Jianjing didn't hurry to reinforce the barrier or take the next step. Instead, he put the possible blame on himself. Xiaohua already understood that what Chu Jianjing said might not be false. A person's character was not easy to change. Chu Jianjing was this kind of person who only knew how to shirk responsibility. Xiaohua looked at the aggressive Chu Jianjing and said to Morong Songyan, who flew over, "Miss Morong, this matter has nothing to do with me. This is Chu family's matter. We'll talk about the details after the situation stabilizes. The most important thing now is to protect this barrier." Chu Jianzheng. Morong Junpeng was beside Morong Songyan. Hearing Xiaohua's words, he shouted loudly, "Xiaohua is now a member of my Morong manor. My Morong family can take responsibility for his actions. Now that the barrier has changed, why aren't you hurrying to deal with it?" Humph, with Morong manor's words, "I'm relieved." Chu Jianzheng snorted coldly and said, "Your Morong manor must give my Chu family an explanation for this matter." Then Chu Jianzhen proudly looked at Xiaohua and coldly said, "Although this evil Taoist has evil intentions, his cultivation is still very shallow. With his little tricks, how could he possibly break my Chu family's restriction formation?" Just as Chu Jianzheng said this, he heard the sound of 10,000 horses galloping in the gradually closing barrier. Moreover, indescribable groans and growls were unceasingly heard. Just as this sound fell into Xiaohua's ears, a kind of blood-red dusk, desolate color, and an indescribable feeling arose from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. Battle of gods and devils? Xiaohua's complexion suddenly changed. He thought in surprise, could it be that there's really a god and devil chess in this god and devil blood pool? Not good. This was already the second time Chu Jianzheng trembled. He couldn't help but look at Xiaohua and roar, what did you do?" Xiaohua coldly looked at this sanctimonious thing and said, "My cultivation is very shallow, what can I do? Besides, why did I come to the god and devil blood pool? Senior Chu's heart is as clear as a mirror. Why did I make myself uncomfortable for no reason? If Senior Chu wants to find the reason, it's better to settle the matter here first before talking about it." Morong Junpeng naturally sensed the might of the demonic god blood pool. Although most of the Chu family's barrier had been mended, within the glass-like barrier, the waves of blood that were originally like ocean waves were now even more devastating than a stormy sea. The berserk aura could no longer be concealed by the barrier, and a feeling of apocalypse arose in the hearts of all the spectators. "Brother Chu," Morong Junpeng hurriedly shouted, "there's no time to lose. Quickly act according to the plan in the jade eyes." But Uncle Zhongyu hasn't arrived yet." This timing Chu Jianzheng was somewhat flustered and replied in a low voice, "Adapt according to the situation. It's already at this juncture, how can you think so much?" Morong Songyan couldn't help but shout, "All the plans of the Chu family are clearly explained in the jade eyes. Now, it's just that the time has been brought forward. It's not a rushed response. Senior can send out a signal and quickly inform Senior Zhongyu. This responsibility?" Chu Jianzheng slightly bit his lips. He still couldn't make a decision. Xiaohua smiled. He already firmly believed in Chu Yang's encounter. Perhaps Chu Yang was hiding something from him, but Chu Yang definitely didn't have the intention to deceive him. Or perhaps Chu Yang himself was deceived by others. Buddhist sect? Xiaohua suddenly thought of the Buddhist light in front of Chu Yang's chest. But before Xiaohua could speak, Morong Songyan glanced at Morong Junpeng and shouted, "Senior, this junior can bear this responsibility. You don't need to worry, you can give the order now." Xiaohua was once again surprised by the strange scene in front of him. Morong Songyan was a junior. It was reasonable to say that he shouldn't say such words in front of Morong Junpeng. But Morong Junpeng didn't hear anything strange. Even Chu Jianzheng felt that it was normal. Xiaohua couldn't help but secretly ponder. Damn it, could it be that there's a secret that I don't know? All right. Chu Jianjing looked at Morong Songyan's determined appearance and nodded. Since Miss Morong said so, this old man will listen to Miss Morong. Chu Jianjing pushed his responsibility to Morong Songyan. But not only was Morong Songyan not displeased, he was even eager to give it a try. He urged, "Senior, quickly give the order. If it's late, it will be troublesome." Seeing this, Chu Jianjing didn't say anything else. He waved his hand and took out a small sword the size of a palm. Sword energy spurted out from his mouth. That small sword emitted a clear cry and flew into the distance. A strange sword cry was mixed with an indescribable fluctuation. Even when the sword light flew, a hazy figure was revealed in the entire barrier. Chapter 3886. Senior Chu. When Murong Songyan saw the signal, the anxiety on his face lessened. He urged, Junior has already seen the plan in the Jade Eye. Junior will go with 14th uncle to the place we agreed on. Senior should also quickly arrange for the Chu family disciples to act according to the plan. AI, since things have reached this point, we can only do this. Chu Jianjin sighed and fiercely glared at Xiaohua. His figure turned into a sword and disappeared. Xiaohua Murong Junpeng couldn't help but ask, what is going on? Xiaohua bitterly smiled. Junior has fallen into the Buddhist sect's trap. However, I'm afraid there's no time to talk about it. Buddhist sect. Murong Junpeng was shocked. He turned to look at Murong Songyan. Both of their eyes flashed with shock. How do you know it's the Buddhist sect? Murong Songyan asked. However, before her voice fell, a strange whistling sound came from the top of the barrier. The dark restriction above Xiaohua and the others broke inch by inch. Tens of millions of wind particles were blown out from the demonic god blood and crazily rushed in all directions. Damn it. Murong Songyan clenched his teeth. 14th uncle, I'm afraid the demonic god blood has changed again. Let's act according to the Chu family's plan. I hope that acting in advance won't affect the future plans. Since things have reached this point, we can only do this. Murong Junpeng replied. He glanced at Xiaohua and said, Xiaohua, there's no need to say anything else. Let's act according to the plan we discussed before. Okay. Xiaohua nodded. His figure followed Murong Junpeng and Murong Songyan to the sky. At this moment, tens of thousands of cultivators had already appeared in the sky. They all activated their magic power and true qi. According to the Chu family's arrangement, they were scattered around the demonic god blood. At this moment, the god-fiend blood pool in front of everyone's eyes, which was originally a bloody mist, began to condense into blood stains. Roaring like a tsunami, ear-piercing sounds and chaotic fluctuations constantly rushed out in all directions. The originally clear sky was now covered with dark clouds. The dark clouds were constantly rolling, and were also stained with traces of blood. This was caused by the god-fiend blood pool's bloody mist soaring into the sky. Not good. Looking at these filthy clouds, Xiaohua was secretly alarmed. He hastily calculated. Although the amount of blood mist rushing into the clouds isn't much, and it doesn't mean much to many cultivators, if it turns into rain, not only will it be harmful to ordinary people, it will also be harmful to the crops on the ground. We can't let these clouds spread to other places. Clang. Loud sword hums could be heard from all over the godly devil blood pool. A huge sword screen rushed out of the ground in the distance and descended towards the sky above the pool. Xiaohua understood that this was one of the 9 sword diagrams of the Chu family. The Chu family divided the entire sword diagram into 9 pieces, which were controlled by the disciples of the Chu family. They were placed in 9 different locations in the blood god pool. Once the order was given, the 9 sword diagrams appeared at the same time and sealed off the blood mist that was rushing into the sky. Then all the cultivators charged into the sword formation and suppressed the blood mist within the sword formation. However, according to the plan in the Jade Eyes, the sword diagram should be activated 2 days later, and the person in charge of it should be an expert of the 7th grade like Chu Zhongyu. Right now, because the life and death talisman had triggered the mutation in the blood god pool, the Chu family had no choice but to activate it in advance. Chu Zhongyu and the other experts of the 7th grade didn't appear, so the might of the sword diagram was obviously inferior. Sure enough, at this moment, Murong Junpeng's complexion slightly changed. He looked at Murong Songyan and said, Yun'er Chu Jianjin sent me a sound transmission and wants me to go over. His sword diagram still lacks some 6th grade cultivators to control it. My Murong manor requested the Chu family to activate it in advance, so I can't not go and control the sword diagram. Yes, 14th uncle, you can go. Since Zhongyu and the other seniors aren't here, 14th uncle will be the mainstay. Murong Songyan nodded and replied. Xiaohua Murong Junpeng opened his mouth and said, in a while when you enter the sword diagram, try your best to protect Yun. Move quickly, I will wait for you inside the sword formation. Yes, I understand. Xiaohua nodded and extended his hand to take out the seal of overturning sea. Murong Junpeng had only left for a short while when he saw the sword diagram flickering. The resplendent sword light was like a huge boat riding the wind and breaking the waves as it penetrated deep into the blood waves. As the blood waves gradually obscured it, Xiaohua and the others could also use their divine senses to inspect it. Xiaohua's current strength had already stepped into the lower stages of the 6th grade, which was equivalent to the void refinement realm of the Dao sect in the Dawn Rain continent. The range of his divine senses was around 1,000 to 3,000 miles. However, Xiaohua's divine senses were far beyond those of the same level. Currently, his divine senses could reach 6,000 miles. In particular, Xiaohua's Buddhist senses were more powerful than his divine senses. Currently, his divine senses could reach 8,000 miles. However, when Xiaohua saw the Buddhist light appear in the life and death talisman, he could faintly feel the existence of Buddhist disciples. Therefore, he didn't dare to release his Buddhist senses, and only used his divine senses to inspect it. Even so, Xiaohua's divine senses were still able to see a very small portion of the sword diagram above the blood god pool. 1,000 miles away from Xiaohua, Murong Junpeng and a few disciples of the Chu clan, as well as 2 other cultivators of the 6th grade, were standing on a sword diagram. Murong Junpeng's cultivation couldn't be considered the highest, but because he was the representative of the Murong clan, he was surrounded by 8 other cultivators. Not only Murong Junpeng, but the other 8 cultivators also released their subbodies. Murong Junpeng's subbody flashed with 3 colored clouds, while the 5 disciples of the Chu clan had their subbodies completely formed by sword light. Countless inscriptions flowed out from Murong Junpeng's subbody, rolling up the clouds and rushing into the sword diagram below him. The inscriptions tumbled on the sword diagram, causing countless pillars of boundless qi and boundless crystal threads to appear. The entire sword diagram released a deafening rumbling sound. Looking at the 5 disciples of the Chu clan, their subbodies' feet were like the tip of a sword, inserted into the sword diagram. A huge amount of boundless qi poured into the subbodies from the void, and through the subbodies, they transformed into sword qi and entered the sword diagram. The momentum of the sword diagram below their feet was vast, even more intense than Murong Junpeng's. Moreover, under the subbodies of the Chu clan disciples, there were hundreds of sword lights flowing all over the sword diagram. These sword lights collided with each other, fused together, and even intertwined with the inscriptions under Murong Junpeng's and the other 2 cultivators' feet, forming crisscrossing sword scars. These sword scars were very deep, and the inscriptions inside were very dazzling. This sword diagram rapidly expanded under the control of the 9 6th grade essence energy cultivators, expanding towards the center of the divinity blood pool. The edges of the sword diagram were extremely sharp, and when it slashed through the blood mist in the air above the divinity blood pool, it emitted a strange sizzling sound. Strands of blood were instantly annihilated by the abundant sword qi. Under the control of Murong Junpeng and the others, the sword diagram pierced into the blood mist without any suspense. Even the blood mist that was separated by the sword diagram was turned into nothingness by the 9 cultivators' divine abilities. For 6th grade cultivators, dealing with the blood mist that had lost its source was as easy as lifting a finger. The formation of the sword diagram seemed to be going very smoothly. Aside from Murong Junpeng's group of 9 cultivators, there were 8 other sword diagrams that flew towards the center of the demonic god blood pond. Each sword diagram rapidly expanded and gradually covered the entire sky above the demonic god blood pond. Of course, following the expansion of the sword diagrams, the area controlled by the 9 cultivators also rapidly expanded. Even the crisscrossing sword scars under their feet were now extremely long, and the number of grids between the sword scars also increased. Although they were all 6th grade cultivators, when the sword diagrams gradually closed in the center of the demonic god blood pond, these 81 6th grade cultivators wouldn't be able to completely control the entire 10,000 li radius demonic god blood pond. Another 9 bursts of sword chi flew out of the blood god's sword diagram and charged towards various parts of the blood god's pool. When Murong Songyan, who was beside Xiaohua, saw this, he hastily took out a small sword from his Qingkuan pouch and opened his mouth. True chi fell on the small sword, and the small sword began to expand and soared into the sky. Looking at the surrounding cultivators, who were also waiting in formation like Xiaohua, they all took out similar small swords. Clang clang at this moment, the sky above the demonic god blood pond was filled with the cries of 10,000 swords. Countless sword rays flew out from the sword diagrams, extremely magnificent and extremely vast. When these sword rays scattered in all directions, they covered the small swords that flew out. Whoosh, in an instant, the small swords formed a net of sword rays that swept down from top to bottom, covering Xiaohua, Murong Songyan, and the cultivators waiting at the edge. Wang. At the same time, the entire sword diagram rapidly shook. Xiaohua and the others moved along the sword rays and entered the sword diagram. Under the effect of the sword diagram, the distance of 1,000 kilometers was covered in an instant. When the sword rays around Xiaohua and the others disappeared, they were standing in a small grid separated by several sword scars. This Xiaohua scanned the area with his divine sense and saw that he and Murong Songyan were standing in a grid. There were also cultivators standing in 2 or 3 adjacent grids. Xiaohua couldn't help but frown as he thought to himself, "This looks like a chessboard for playing chess. Then aren't we all the chess pieces on the board? Then wouldn't the so-called demonic god chess piece also fall on this sword diagram? Such a huge demonic god blood pond actually needs to be covered by this sword diagram. Just the Chu family is truly beyond their power. Could it be that the Murong family also has a part in this?" Just as Xiaohua was thinking, a voice that sounded like the cry of a sword resounded from within the sword guard. "Fellow immortals, please activate the sword diagram below according to the chants recorded in the Jade Eyes. Wait until we completely cover the Fiend God blood pool before we decide on the next step." Murong Songyan glanced at Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua, if you're ready, let's begin." "Okay." Xiaohua nodded. His entire body flashed with sword radiance. Waves of righteous chi flew out from the void and landed on the sword radiance. The huge sword instantly became several dozen meters long. Although it was a lot smaller than the swords of the Chu family disciples, it was enough to catch Murong Songyan's attention. Chapter 3887. This Xiaohua is truly amazing. He actually managed to cultivate the sword chi of a Confucian cultivator to such a level. If given enough time, he will definitely be able to shake the world. Only, it's truly a pity. As Murong Songyan thought this, he clapped his hands and tricolored true chi rushed out of his head. An inscription flashing on his body also flew out. As the saying goes, many hands pick up firewood, the flames grow. Previously, the 81 6th grade essence energy cultivators controlling the sword diagram was indeed powerful, but the sword diagram was already somewhat shaky in the blood god pool. When Xiaohua and the others fell into the sword diagram, although their cultivations were far inferior to Murong Juanping's, there were too many people. The sword diagram, which was originally a bit bumpy, instantly stabilized and rushed towards the center of the blood god pool even faster. Seeing that the sword diagram was about to close, the blood mist above the blood god pool was squeezed into a struggling blood dragon. A huge force suddenly entered the sword diagram from where the 9 sword diagrams closed. With a kacha sound, the edges of the 9 sword diagrams immediately cracked. Over 100 weaker cultivators were unexpectedly thrown into the air by this impact. However, this detail was not unexpected. Everyone had already discussed this when they received the Jade Eyes. The 81 cultivators roared in unison, and 81 pillars of chi appeared with a loud bang. Xiaohua and the others also activated their true chi at the same time. With a hong sound, the blood dragon's neck was suddenly grabbed by the sword diagram and cut in half. The blood mist in the air disappeared with the wind. The blood mist under the sword diagram unyieldingly attacked the sword diagram along with the other blood waves. Unfortunately, the sword diagram was now tightly closed. The sharp sword light flickered and pierced out. The blood mist rushed into the sword light, and immediately turned into nothingness. Good. Everyone couldn't help but shout when they saw this. They knew that the first step had been completed without any danger. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Although Xiaohua was happy, he hid inside the sword light and looked at the sword light flickering above the sword diagram. He thought to himself, right now, we've only sealed the blood mist of the blood god pool. Next, we'll have to suppress this blood mist. He had no idea what the blood mist was, but it looked similar to the aura of the netherworld. If he could collect it, it wouldn't be too difficult. After all, it was better to release it than to block it. For the Chu clan to forcefully suppress it might be a little dangerous. Of course, if it wasn't for the danger, this so-called celestial devil chest would have been found by others long ago. How could it be the Chu clan's turn? The blood mist of the demonic god blood pool was forcibly suppressed by the Chu family's sword diagram. The power that soared to the sky was brewing under the sword diagram. After a short while, Xiaohua felt the sword diagram under his feet start to tremble, and the intersecting sword scars on the sword diagram also started to shine with different colors. Sword diagram, blood pool, I will slay gods and demons with my sword. A loud and clear voice filled with vicissitudes of life came from the other side of the sword diagram. Then, the sword light of the sword mark shone brightly, and a powerful suction force was generated from the sword guard. Xiaohua glanced at Murong Songyan and didn't dare to be negligent. At this time, there were several tens of thousands of cultivators fighting against the entire demonic god blood pool. Xiaohua's individual strength was very weak. Murong Songyan was as serious as Xiaohua. His true qi entered the sword diagram along with his body. The sword scars around Xiaohua and Murong Songyan emitted a dazzling sword light, and a several zhang thick sword pillar came out from the bottom of the sword diagram. It quickly pierced into the blood mist. The sword pillar's brilliance seemed to be solid, and everywhere it went, the blood mist turned into ashes. Moreover, there were still some thin threads of light and clouds between the sword pillars, and they were connected to each other. Although the sword light of each sword pillar was different in strength, under the balance of these sword threads, all of the sword pillars fell down at the same time. Following the fall of the sword pillars, a large amount of blood mist was destroyed by the sword pillars. Xiaohua looked at the sword pillars, looked at the situation of the entire sword diagram, and secretly muttered in his heart, the Chu clan is really a fourth-rate aristocratic family, really extravagant. This sword diagram must have been passed down by the ancestors of the Chu clan. It's impossible to refine such a large origin formation without a literature sage or literature star realm, right? But the problem is that this sword diagram is suitable to be used to destroy the great formation protecting the mountain. But to use it on this demonic god blood pool, I feel that something is wrong. Let's not talk about a group of 6th-level origin energy cultivators working together to disperse the blood mist. Just by starting from a corner of the demonic god blood pool, I'm afraid that they can tear a hole in the blood pool. It's better than covering the entire blood pool, right? I really don't know what the Chu clan is planning to do. Boom! Just as Xiaohua was pondering, the entire demonic god blood pool shook. All of the sword pillars pierced into the blood pool at almost the same time, and the huge impact lifted the sword diagram up again. And at the same time the sword diagram flashed, the nearby Murong Songyun's face flashed with a trace of redness, and he almost groaned in a low voice. Oh. Xiaohua hastily focused his attention, and immediately sensed the strangeness of the sword diagram. As the sword diagram trembled, a strange aura rushed into the sword pillars. This aura was not some restriction, nor was it any magic power, nor was it the aura of the underworld. However, Xiaohua was somewhat familiar with this aura. It was similar to the ghost technique used by the underworld's magistrate that day, and was specially used to attack the mysterious dark clouds. Although this aura was extremely weak, it was still very hard for Murong Songyun, who had never cultivated any soul techniques, to resist. As for Xiaohua, because his soul cultivation had already entered the sorcerer realm, he did not have any special soul techniques to defend himself, and this strange aura could not cause any harm to him. That's not right. Xiaohua was somewhat astonished. Righteous Qi had always been the nemesis of the demon realm and the underworld, especially that Confucian cultivator's innate life energy. It was an existence that could wipe out death energy. How could Murong Songyun, who was at 5th level origin energy, be afraid of this weak aura? Xiao Hua's eyes slightly turned, and his entire body began to tremble. He asked in a low voice, Lady Morong, why is this aura so strange? This Xiao feels that it is similar to the water of the Yellow Springs, but this Xiao has the righteous chi of Confucian cultivators. Why would I be afraid of this aura? Morong Songyun's lips were somewhat green, and the true energy in his body was rapidly revolving. He opened his mouth and said, Fellow immortal Xiao might not know, but the blood fog and blood stains in this demonic god blood swamp are not completely netherworld chi. At the same time, there is also some demonic chi, and some other things that we Confucian cultivators do not know. Of course, we do not need to be afraid of pure netherworld chi and demonic chi, but with that strange thing mixed in, even a literary sage with 8th level origin energy would not dare to act blindly without thinking. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua nodded his head. No wonder no one in the hidden immortal continent dared to look for the demonic god chess in this demonic god blood swamp. Xiao Hua's words naturally had a double meaning, but Morong Songyun did not point it out. Instead, he looked at Xiao Hua's sword and asked curiously, Fellow immortal Xiao, your flying sword technique seems to be somewhat similar to legalism, but it is also somewhat different. This concubine really did not expect that a Taoist cultivator, who could not even compare to Duan Muqing back then, would actually advance to this level. Hihi. Xiao Hua faintly smiled and said, Lady, are you not the same? Back then, this Xiao did not expect that you would actually be a master of 5th level origin energy. Hihi. This concubine was transforming back then. Not to mention 4th level origin energy, I was not even at 3rd level origin energy. Of course you would not be able to see it. Morong Songyun smiled and asked, Do you think that this concubine is inferior to that princess by Hua? Xiao Hua was speechless. He looked at the smiling Morong Songyun and shook his head. This Xiao has never drunk any daughter's tea. Daughter's tea? Ah. Morong Songyun laughed loudly, as if he understood the meaning behind Xiao Hua's words. However, at this moment, a huge wave of aura blew over like ice. The entire sword pillar's sword aura actually gave birth to a light purple color. Morong Songyun's body suddenly trembled, as if his body was about to collapse. Wu Morong Songyun didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly took out a fist-sized flower from his bosom. He opened his mouth, and a mouthful of true energy entered the flower. The flower grew with the wind, and in a moment, it turned into a several dozen feet long lily, covering him and Xiao Hua. Thin stamens flew out of the lily like soul threads, wrapping around Xiao Hua and Morong Songyun. That ice-like aura was immediately cut off by a large portion. Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted. Inserting the sword pillar into the pool of blood was something that was discussed with the jade eyes. However, this cold aura is truly powerful. I wonder how the Chu family will deal with it. Unless they have an extremely strong yang weapon. Morong Songyun also frowned. Otherwise, I also don't know how to deal with it. Kung Kung. While Morong Songyun was speaking, the sound of an army came from above the sword diagram. Shortly after, a colorful cloud rolled over from the horizon. On the cloud, there were dozens of women wearing colorful clothes. They were either holding a pipa or a harp. The sound of an army came from their instruments. Looking behind these women, there were 8 well-rounded beautiful women riding on a wave of flowers flying over. Each of the women had a fresh flower on their head, and each of the women wore a colorful feather dress. Each of the women had a sweet smile on their face, and their eyes were filled with holiness. What are they doing? Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, and he immediately sensed that these women were only between the 3rd and 4th grade of essence energy. Compared to the majority of the cultivators on the sword diagram, they were inferior. He didn't understand what kind of help these women had. Morong Songyun also seemed to be a bit confused. While he urged the white flower to block the cold aura, his beautiful eyes flashed with doubt as he looked at the sky. The 8 women stepped on the rain of flowers and landed on the sword diagram in the midst of the music. When the music came to an abrupt end, the 8 women slapped their own heads with the back of their hands. Immediately after that, dual-colored true chi gushed out, and 8 shiny objects of different colors flew out from their heads. Ah! Xiao Hua's divine sense scanned the things that flew out, and he was stunned. He could not help but stare, and even his pupils could not help but slightly dilate. Because these 8 shiny things were none other than 8 naked female sculptures. Chapter 3888. This woman's sculpture was made of crystal, and there was a hint of pink in the sparkling light. It was even more alluring than the skin of an ordinary woman. What was special was that the size of the sculpture was similar to that of an ordinary person, and the various details on the surface of the sculpture were particularly vivid. Although the true chi of the 8 women could cover up some of the details, it was still enough to make one's blood boil upon seeing it. This Murong Songyan blushed shyly at first, but then he seemed to have thought of something and exclaimed, "This is the 8 hidden immortal beauties." Xiaohua naturally realized that he was acting inappropriately. He hurriedly retracted his gaze and turned to look at Murong Songyun. However, he didn't know why, but in his eyes, Murong Songyun was actually the same as the 8 beautiful crystal statues, as if he wasn't wearing any clothes. Xiaohua hurriedly closed his eyes and shook his head. Only then did he ask in a low voice, "I'm ignorant and inexperienced. Miss, please teach me. What are the hidden immortal 8 beauties?" Murong Songyun sneered and asked disdainfully, "Since fellow immortal Xiao cultivates my Confucian cultivation technique, you must have read my Confucian scriptures. Do you know the 8 hidden immortal beauties?" This Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head and said, "I really don't know. I'll have to ask Miss for advice." "Yes." Murong Songyun nodded and replied, "You really aren't a disciple of legalism." When Murong Songyun disintegrated, the 8 crystal statues continued to expand. However, at this time, the clouds had already become clothes that covered the crystal statues' curves. Legend has it that in the ancient times, there were 8 peerless beauties in the hidden immortal continent. Each of them can be described with 4 sentences. Murong Songyun explained, "A beauty that outshines the moon and puts flowers to shame, a beauty that captivates the birds and beasts, a body that can cause the downfall of a country and its people, a figure that can captivate the soul." Oh, these 4 sentences describe 8 beauties? Xiaohua once again cast his gaze towards the 8 crystal beauties. Yes, a beauty that outshines the moon and shames the flowers, a beauty that captivates the birds and beasts. It is used to describe the beauty of Shishir, Diaochan, Zhaojun and Yuhuan. Look at the 4 on the left. Not only are they extremely beautiful, the clothes they are wearing also have faint patterns of the moon, flowers, fish and geese. These are the 4 beauties. As Murong Songyun spoke, he pointed with his finger. Look at the 4 on the right. They are Daji Baosi, Consort Xiang and Fian. Their bodies are so beautiful that even the fairies can't compare to them. That's why they are praised for their beauty. The beauty of these 4 beauties can no longer be seen clearly. Presumably, fellow immortal Xiao has already seen them once, right? Xiaohua didn't answer, but instead asked, "These 8 beauties are indeed world-shaking beauties, but what's the use of their crystal statues at this time? You looked very surprised just now." "Alas, this is an ancient secret of my scholarly family." Murong Songyun sighed and said, "Although these 8 beauties are unrivaled in beauty, they still can't escape the calamity of a beautiful woman's life. None of them have a good ending. However, their fates gave some male cultivators a lot of insights. It was said that many literary sages and literary stars' poems were written by these 8 beauties. Furthermore, it was rumored that when 8 literary stars ascended, they used love as a knife and love as a chisel to carve out 8 beautiful crystal sculptures. Each sculpture contained the insights of a literary star, and each sculpture revealed the beauty of a beautiful woman. Furthermore, when each sculpture is completed, all sorts of astronomical phenomena will be born. The so-called beauty that outshines the moon and flowers, captivates the birds and beasts, brings disaster to the country and people, and is infatuated by the astronomical phenomena. Imperial equipment? Spirit weapon? A soul armament? When Xiaohua heard this, he was even more surprised. He didn't know what this 8 beauties sculpture was. Then what is the use of these 8 beauties sculpture? Xiaohua asked. Murong Songyun looked at the women under the crystal sculptures and faintly said, "Just watch, they're about to cast the spell." As if to prove Murong Songyun's words, the 8 women opened their mouths at the same time. At this moment, what they spat out wasn't true qi, but essence blood. When the essence blood fell into the crystal sculptures, a layer of scarlet appeared on the sculptures, and then a layer of blood light flowed out from the crystal sculptures. When the 8 crystal beauties began to tremble slightly, then 8 faint rays of light shot out from the crystal beauties' heads and landed on the 8 women's bodies. The flesh of the 5 women instantly withered. The beautiful old woman who had turned into a bag of bones didn't even have any flesh left. Only white bones remained. When the light disappeared, these bones turned into ashes and disappeared in the wind. The Xiaohua was a bit shocked. Then he looked at the 8 crystal beauties' skin and flesh gradually grew back. Each of their peerless appearances began to appear. The one closest to Xiaohua had creamy skin and picturesque eyebrows. Her eyelashes that hadn't opened yet slightly trembled, causing Xiaohua's heart to tremble along with her eyelashes. The one slightly further away had a face that was like a full moon. She seemed to be slightly inferior to the previous woman, but when Xiaohua's gaze landed on the curves, he couldn't help but feel an inexplicable heat in his stomach. On the side, Murong Songyan faintly said, "This 8 beauties sculpture requires 8 girls with similar aptitudes to control it. These girls have to use their own essence blood to nourish the sculpture. When their true qi is formed, they have to send the sculpture into their bodies to cultivate it. When it's time to use it, they have to use their life essence to activate the will left behind by Wenxing. After the 8 beauties sculpture is used, although it only lasts for a few moments, its strength can reach the level of a Wen saint. If the 8 beauties sculpture is used in battle, it will definitely be a great killing weapon. If it's used here, I don't think it will have much of an effect. AI for this demonic god chess. The Chu family has prepared a lot." Xiaohua sighed. This sword diagram, which one of the 8 beauties sculpture doesn't need to spend a lot of time and manpower. Only with effort will there be rewards. Murong Songyan faintly smiled and said, "If the Chu family wants to enter the top 3 aristocratic families, they must pay a price." "What about the Murong family?" Xiaohua asked with interest. Murong Songyan calmly replied, "They can only surpass it. It's just that you're not a member of an aristocratic family, so you don't know." At this time, the 8 crystal beauties had already been reconstructed. Each of them was as beautiful as fairies, and each of them danced with countless temptations. Of course, their auras that soared into the sky caused the red clouds in the sky to stir. As the 8 living crystal beauties soared into the sky, their figures suddenly crossed 1,000 li. These 8 crystal beauties stood separately on the sword diagram. A beautiful song came out of their mouths. As the song spread out, 8 terrifying pillars of vast qi mixed with a huge amount of crystal threads fell from the sky, rushing into the crystal beauty's head. The crystal beauty's body was covered in a rainbow-colored radiance. The rainbow light quickly descended along with the dance of the beauties, and pounced on the sword diagram. "This is music." Seeing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but be shocked. How can music alone have such power? Boom boom boom. As if answering Xiaohua's question, the entire world trembled. The sword diagram that was previously washed away by the terrifying aura was now rapidly descending. The countless sword pillars that were stopped by the blood waves suddenly expanded and crazily pierced into the blood pool. The sword diagram that couldn't be activated by tens of thousands of cultivators was now firmly controlled by the 8 crystal beauties with the strength of literary saints. When the sword diagram was completely repaired, the godfiend blood pool could no longer be heard. Rays of light flashed in everyone's eyes, and the 8 crystal beauties once again turned into sparkling and translucent crystals before falling from the sky. Although the crystal beauties were still naked, Xiaohua's eyes were filled with shock, and he didn't dare to have a trace of blasphemy, because the power of these 8 beauties was really too strong. When the 8 crystal sculptures fell, the group of women who came by stepping on the clouds hurriedly caught them, respectfully covered them with a rainbow brocade, and hurriedly left. Seeing these women fly away, the exhausted Chu Jianjin appeared in the sky. He waved his hand and said, "Disciples, rest for a moment, then we will work together to break the seal." Although Chu Jianjin spoke while standing in the sky, his voice came from the sword marks in the sword diagram. It sounded sonorous and powerful. Xiaohua stood inside the sword guard and looked at the cultivators, who heaved a sigh of relief. His heart skipped a beat, because Murong Songyan, who had been attacked by the cold aura earlier, did not seem to have relaxed. Moreover, Xiaohua could faintly see that there was still zhenqi flowing between Murong Songyun's feet. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Just as Xiaohua thought of this, a strange sound came from the sword diagram, and soon after, Xiaohua felt an inexplicably familiar fluctuation. Xiaohua hurriedly released his divine sense, and saw that fist-sized bubbles appeared in the blood under the sword diagram. All the sword pillars around the bubbles shattered upon contact, even worse than ordinary withered wheat straw. This fluctuation? Xiaohua suddenly realized something. It's like what I encountered when I was pregnant in the void, but it's a bit different. Xiaohua hurriedly looked at Murong Songyun. Murong Songyun's face was a bit pale, and his eyes were flickering. Miss Murong, Xiaohua asked straightforwardly. Although you and I aren't close friends, now that we meet again after parting at Jiaxinglu, we are old acquaintances. I originally didn't want to get involved in the trouble of the blood, but Miss appeared and forced me to stay. This Xiao promised Senior Murong to protect Miss's safety, but now that things have come to this, is Miss still hiding something? What is there to hide? Murong Songyun bit his lips and said in a low voice, the blood is a famous forbidden area in the hidden immortal continent, and the Chu family is only a fourth-rate family. If they want to covet the celestial devil chess, they naturally have some methods. Moreover, there are many unknown abnormalities in the blood. Chapter 3889. While Murong Songyun was talking, Chu Jianjun flew out of the sword diagram and shouted, Disciples, don't worry. This is the reaction of the celestial demon chess. Our Chu family has encountered this in the past. The reason why we didn't do anything is because this anomaly is really troublesome. Ordinary imperial tools can't restrain it. 10 years ago, our Chu family got a treasure by chance that can restrain this anomaly. Disciples, please wait a moment. Then Chu Jianjun took out a small Qianquan bag and shouted, Disciples, where are you following Chu Jianjun's order? Another several hundred Chu family disciples flew into the sky with the help of the sword radiance. However, these several hundred Chu family disciples didn't have any sword radiance around them, and they didn't stand on auspicious clouds either. Buddha. These Chu family disciples have Buddha cultivation? Xiaohua was stunned. At the same time, he felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, Chu Jianjun took out an item from his Qianquan bag and showed it to Xiaohua. It was a Skanda demon subduing diagram. However, this diagram was different from ordinary ones. It was a formation diagram with hundreds of Skanda. Each Skanda looked different and held different Buddhist tools. Some were demon-subduing pestles, some were monk staffs, and some were alms bowls. Hundreds of Chu family disciples activated their telekinesis, and the formation diagram flashed with Buddhist light. It was like a huge Buddhist cloud that quickly spread in all directions. Murong Songyun. Seeing the Buddhist tool on the celestial demon blood pool, Xiaohua was angry and said coldly, Since we're here, why is there a Buddhist tool? Could it be that the Buddhist light I saw before was fake? Miss, if you don't tell me the truth, I'll leave right now. Then, Xiaohua recalled his avatar, and was about to leave the sword diagram. However, just as he moved, a huge suction force grabbed him, and he couldn't move at all. Although Murong Songyun was a bit panicked, his eyes were full of ridicule. He said, Xiaohua, since we're here, why bother? You and I are both chess pieces on the chessboard. Why don't we wait until the game is over? If you don't have strength, then you're just a chess piece that can be manipulated by others. Xiaohua smiled coldly. If you have strength, then a chess piece can also overturn the chessboard. As he spoke, there was a flash of dark light around Xiaohua, and the sword guard Murong Songyun was and began to tremble. The seemingly unbreakable sword pattern was covered in a layer of sword energy. Clusters of blood light and inscriptions condensed and rushed out from the sword energy. Xiaohua. Murong Songyun was shocked and quickly. He shouted, Stop. If you leave, a flaw will appear in the sword diagram. Not only will the decades of planning by us Confucian cultivators be for naught, even the tens of thousands of cultivators on the sword diagram will die because of you. As long as you stop, I'll tell you the truth. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. He looked at Murong Songyun's panicked expression, and then looked at the broken sword diagram under his feet. He knew that what Morong Songyan said was true. He was already a chess piece on the chessboard. If he wanted to escape, he had to destroy a corner of the sword diagram. Once that corner was formed, the entire chessboard would be swallowed by the blood of the gods and devils. Since there was a Buddhist light and a Buddhist weapon, if he destroyed it, wouldn't the hidden immortal continent's Confucian cultivators hate him to the bone? At that time, he could only escape to the Western Paradise and the Thousand Devils Sacred Realm. Fine Xiaohua stopped his power, and the sword diagram quickly closed. Xiaohua stared at Morong Songyan and said, "I'll believe you this time. Speak. You. What is your strength? Is it the upper tier of the 5th grade?" Morong Songyan looked at the sword guard under Xiaohua's feet and said in shock, "When I saw you, you weren't even 4th grade yet. Since Lady Morong has the Morong family's secret technique, why can't I have the Dao Sect's butterfly transformation technique?" Xiaohua said indifferently, "Lady should quickly answer my question." "Fine." Morong Songyan bitterly smiled and looked around. He transmitted his voice. Actually, the Chu family's search for the god and devil chess in the blood of the gods and devils was just a cover. Oh, it wasn't completely a cover. The Chu family did have some movements in the hidden immortal continent. They did want to find something, but they didn't find anything for several hundred years. But 10 years ago, when they set their sights on the blood of the gods and devils, this operation became a trap. A trap to kill the Buddhist sect in the hidden immortal continent. No wonder. Xiaohua suddenly realized. I knew it. How could a god and devil chess be worth a 4th grade Confucian family's effort? And such a huge sacrifice? How much do you know about the god and devil chess? Morong Songyan frowned and asked curiously. Isn't it just one of the 10 great imperial artifacts? It's even ranked 5th. Xiaohua disagreed. But he immediately felt something was wrong. His eyes focused and asked, could it be that the rumors are wrong? That's right. Morong Songyan nodded. This god and devil chess is far from the 10 great imperial artifacts that you think. Xiaohua quickly waved his hand to stop Morong Songyan's explanation. He urged, Lady, tell me about this trap first. 10 years ago, when the conflict between the immortals and Buddhas was getting more and more intense, the Confucian families in the hidden immortal continent already had plans to kill the Buddhist sect's disciples. But the Buddhist sect's bald donkeys were truly sinister. They only left an old monk without any Buddhist cultivation as the abbot. This made us unable to find an excuse. And after seeing the old monk killed, the elders knew that this matter wouldn't end well, so they discussed and found an excuse. Many cultivators in the hidden immortal continent knew that the Chu family was looking for something, so the families found the Chu family and asked for their help. Of course, the Chu family wouldn't agree so easily. After some discussion, the families agreed to some conditions of the Chu family and began to set up the trap for the god and devil blood pool. As for the specific conditions, I don't know. I only found out about the truth a few months ago. It seems that after this battle, the Chu family will be promoted to a third-rate family. Of course, accompanying 7th granduncle to the god and devil blood pool is not a coincidence. I came here as a bait to let the Buddhist sect's disciples dispel their suspicions. Morong Songyan was somewhat distressed. The Chu family is a 4th-rate family. If a 2nd or 3rd-rate family interfered, the Chu family definitely wouldn't come here to look for treasure. Therefore, it's not easy for experts above the 4th-rate family to appear. But if there aren't any high-level families appearing, it's too fake. Because it's impossible for the high-level families to not know about this. There must be someone who can suppress the high-level families, and this person must represent a force. It's impossible for it to be one of the 4 great families. All the families' gazes fell on the first-rate families. I don't know what kind of compromise they will make, but it fell on my Morong family. As for me, at this point, Morong Songyan slightly lowered his head and faintly said, and my background is somewhat inappropriate. In order to cover up my background, I had no choice but to agree to this condition. Of course, Xiaohua, you also saw it. This time it's very dangerous. The slightest bit of carelessness will result in death. Therefore, I asked 7th granduncle to send 2 granduncles to protect me. Serves me right. When I saw you that day, I thought of how powerful you were and wanted to pull you over. In the end, you also saw it. Seventh granduncle actually tested your strength. In order to not arouse the Buddhist sect's suspicions, seventh granduncle only sent 14th granduncle. Of course, seventh granduncle's promise to you must be true. Because if you protect me and kill the Buddhist sect's disciples, the various large families should understand your role. They are very powerful. The Immortal Palace's militarists don't dare to provoke them too much. Your matter shouldn't count for much. Oh, so it's like that. Xiaohua suddenly understood. Then, he looked at the Buddhist clouds that filled the sky falling down. On the Buddhist clouds, skandhas appeared one by one. He asked, then what's the specific arrangement? The specific arrangement is very simple. Murong Songyun looked at the Buddhist clouds and was alarmed. He replied, first, the Chu family enticed the Buddhist sect's disciples to notice the god-demon blood pool's treasure hunt. Then, they provoked them to have the idea of killing the Confucian cultivators. After all, there are tens of thousands of Confucian cultivators in the god-demon blood pool. Many of them are 4th or 5th grade essence energy. If there is a war between immortals and Buddhas, they will be the main force. If the Buddhist sect makes the first move, they will definitely gain a big advantage in the future. How did they provoke them? Xiaohua was somewhat surprised. I don't know the specific situation. Murong Songyun said with a smile. It seems like the Chu family spread the news that they were looking for an imperial weapon that could suppress the god-demon blood pool. Later, they actually found this skandha demon subduing diagram. Anyone who saw it would know that the Buddhist sect's disciples had taken the bait. I understand now. Xiaohua nodded. The Buddhist sect's disciples must have done something to this skandha demon subduing diagram. They could take advantage of the time when the Chu family was activating the diagram to kill tens of thousands of Confucian cultivators. Then the Confucian aristocratic family would take advantage of the situation and attack after the diagram. Correct. Murong Songyun bit his lips and said in a low voice. The plan was like this. The Jedi's also arranged everything well. But unfortunately, an accident happened. The time was brought forward. Xiaohua nodded. The Buddhist sect's disciples are not vegetarians. Damn it, no, they are vegetarians. They are not stupid. When they saw that something was wrong, they wanted to leave. But they were not willing to give up the skandha demon subduing diagram, or the lives of these tens of thousands of Confucian cultivators. So they found Chu Yang. This Chu Yang has nothing to do with the whole plan. Maybe he was really disappointed in life and survival. But his death was used by the Buddhist sect. Only, how did the Chu family have that kind of strange life and death talisman cultivation method? This is unthinkable. Chapter 3890. Who is Chu Yang? Murong Songyun was dumbfounded when he heard Xiaohua's voice that sounded like he was talking to himself. Chu Yang is a disciple of the Chu clan that I met before the restriction of the blood of gods and demons. Xiaohua looked at the incomplete skandha demon subduing formation diagram and explained. His life experience was somewhat miserable, and he cultivated a certain death life and death talisman. What's more, this life and death talisman actually required a Taoist spell to activate. Perhaps he was bewitched by a Buddhist disciple and wanted to find a Taoist disciple, but he didn't expect that he would find this Xiao. When that person committed suicide, this Xiao just happened to be there. The Buddhist disciple used Chu Yang to force the Chu clan to act 3 days earlier, and the experts of the Chu clan and the other clans weren't here. The Buddhist disciple caught us off guard. That's right. Although this concubine has just stepped into the 5th level of origin energy, in this godfiend blood pool, under the Buddhist sect's planning, I might really lose my life. Murong Songyun said with a bitter smile. Sai 5th grade. Miss Murong, how old are you? Xiaohua looked at Murong Songyun and asked. You. Why are you asking this? Murong Songyun didn't understand. Xiaohua shook his head slightly. Looking at the Buddhist sect's formation diagram descending, he smiled bitterly and said, previously, this Xiao felt that nascent soul was unreachable, and that a 4th grade origin energy realm cultivator would be a god. But now that I see a 5th grade and 6th grade origin energy realm cultivator, this Xiao feels somewhat uneasy. Haha, Xiaohua, you're a Taoist cultivator, so you don't know the background of my Confucian clan. If you become a guest elder of my Murong clan in the future, You'll know. Murong Songyan smiled and said, the Confucian cultivators you've seen before are all training outside. At most, they're at the upper 4th grade. Those above 5th grade are all cultivating in the clan. If there's nothing important, they won't show themselves. When the war between immortals and Buddhists comes, you'll see the strength of my Confucian clan. It'll definitely shock you. What about the guest elders of the various Confucian clans? Are there any out-of-body, spirit-severing stage cultivators? Xiaohua asked. Hehe, this is the secret of my scholarly cultivator clan. You'll naturally know after you become a guest elder. Murong Songyan didn't directly answer. Seeing that the Skanda demon subduing array diagram had descended less than 10 feet, the Buddhist light had already enveloped Xiaohua and the others. Xiaohua began to circulate the quintessential essence in his body. Xiaohua's Taoism cultivation was much more effective against the Buddhist sect's techniques. Suddenly, Xiaohua asked, how many people know the truth of the matter? Not too much. Murong Songyan replied without hesitation. This matter is of great importance. If this concubine wasn't the bait, this concubine wouldn't know. In other words, Miss Murong is in great danger. Xiaohua looked at Murong Songyan meaningfully. That's why I ask fellow immortal Xiao to take pity on me. At this point, Murong Songyan could only plead. 14th uncle has been invited to control the sword diagram. He won't be able to return anytime soon. The mechanism was too clever, and it took Qingqing's life instead. Xiaohua looked down at the sword guard and said, if it wasn't for this sword guard, most people would have been able to escape. If they could escape, how could the Buddhist sect take the bait? Murong Songyan replied. If you want to do anything, you have to pay a price. What's the use of the Skanda demon subduing array diagram? How could the Buddhist sect's disciples use this Skanda demon subduing array diagram to kill Confucian cultivators? Xiaohua asked again. This Buddhist artifact has been in the Chu family's possession for so long. They must have found some clues, right? This concubine really doesn't know. Otherwise, this concubine wouldn't be so worried. Murong Songyan bitterly smiled. Then her face turned cold. However, if in the end, this concubine can't survive alone, this concubine will order Chu Jianjin to destroy this sword diagram. Let those Buddhist sect's disciples who attacked us die with us in the demonic god blood pool. Si Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. He looked at Murong Songyan. He really didn't expect that this beautiful woman in front of him was actually so ruthless. Moreover, it was even more impossible for him to know that if he didn't have the strength of a 5th-level origin energy, how could Murong Songyan tell him the truth, and even have other plans? Murong Songyan didn't care about Xiaohua's shock. She said indifferently, Xiaohua, you don't know how hard it is for us Confucian cultivators to grow up. This concubine has to go through so much trouble to reach this point. This concubine has to let them know. Murong Songyan was never weak. Them? Xiaohua understood. He knew that Murong Songyan's words had another meaning. However, he didn't want to get involved with the Murong family's matters. He waved his hand and the array diagram within a few li flashed with lightning. Balls of Buddhist light were shattered by the lightning. Stop. Xiaohua, what are you doing? Chu Jianjin's angry voice came from the sword mark. If you attack again, don't blame this old man for not giving the Murong family any face. Actually, there was no need for Chu Jianjin to say anything. Xiaohua, who was proficient in Buddhist techniques, already saw something strange. This array diagram, how can it produce soul strands? Because in the lightning, extremely dim green light strands were faintly produced. They were attached to the intense Buddhist light, like the faint stamen of a heavenly flower. If one wasn't proficient in Buddhist techniques and soul cultivation techniques, how could they see it? No. This isn't a Buddhist weapon. Xiaohua hurriedly shouted. This is a soul weapon. Oh. This time, it was Murong Songyan's turn to be surprised. What did you say? Xiaohua, soul weapon? What's a soul weapon? Unfortunately, before Xiaohua could speak, and before the Skanda demon suppression array diagram could land on the sword diagram, the several hundred Skandao images on the diagram began to move. Pu every Skandao image was like a blooming daisy as hundreds of green seal characters flew out from these Skandao images. Each of the green seal characters caused a strange movement, just like when Xiaohua used the green seal characters. The moaning of gods and ghosts immediately reverberated in the sky above the demonic god blood pool. The black clouds that were already low in pressure became even more rampant. One by one, it was as if the green seal characters had summoned a demon god and viciously pounced on the people on the sword diagram. The several hundred green seal characters began to flicker with a dark green brilliance, and began to collide with each other. One after another, there were only a few dozen left. Not good. Although Xiaohua didn't know what use these green seal characters had, he knew that they had the power of gods and ghosts. As long as these green seal characters were completed, they might be able to destroy heaven and earth. Therefore, Xiaohua didn't hesitate to use the lightning and thunder technique, wanting to use the 3-corpse-in lightning to destroy these green seal characters. However, just as a dark green brilliance appeared between Xiaohua's eyebrows, the sword scars around Xiaohua and Murong Songyan gave birth to a huge sword light, and slashed toward Xiaohua's waist fudge. Xiaohua roared, waving both hands in front of him to summon several sword pillars to fight back against the sword light. At the same time, he summoned more lightning and thunder to meet the enormous green seal text. Kung kung, a deafening sound of swords rang out. Xiaohua's sword pillars were destroyed by the sword light of the sword diagram. The remaining sword light slashed toward Xiaohua's waist. In an instant, the qi protecting Xiaohua's body was destroyed. Ah! Xiaohua didn't even make a sound before Murong Songyan cried out. She didn't expect Chu Jianjin to suddenly make a move. The sword diagram controlled by tens of thousands of people was indeed powerful. Even Xiaohua, who was at the 6th level of origin energy, wasn't a match for the sword qi. Kung, a sound that wasn't inferior to the previous sword cry came from Xiaohua's body. A string of sparks jumped in the air. When the sword light landed on Xiaohua's body, it actually didn't injure Xiaohua at all. Murong Songyan, who was originally anxious, was dumbfounded. However, she only stood there blankly for a moment before she angrily roared. Chu Jianjin, what are you doing? Chu Jianjin's voice sounded. Xiaohua, this is only a warning. If you make any more moves, it won't be that simple. Eh? Chu Jianjin didn't even finish his warning before the huge ball of Yin lightning landed on the green seal characters. Xiaohua was now a sorcerer. Although he didn't know many soul spells, his lightning and thunder technique was several times stronger than before. The 3 corpses in lightning tore through the void. It also carried the might of gods and ghosts. It was extremely powerful. Lightning flashed within a few hundred li of the sword diagram. However, although Xiaohua was strong, he wasn't as strong as the Skanda demonic formation. The several hundred Buddhist disciples used their telekinesis to activate the green seal characters. To cover a few thousand li, Xiaohua's 3 corpses in lightning covered 1 or 2 of the green seal characters. However, under Xiaohua's in lightning, only half of the soul strands were destroyed. The entire green seal character wasn't damaged at all. Under the illumination of the lightning, the gigantic green seal text was even faster than the lightning. It rapidly condensed and transformed into a new green seal text. Without waiting for Xiaohua to hesitate whether or not he should use his soul technique again, 1,000 li large green seal text finally flickered in the air. What kind of green seal character is this? Xiaohua's eyes were filled with shock. He didn't know what this green seal character was. Of course, he also knew that this huge green seal character wasn't one of the 365 green seal characters. Instead, it was a green seal character made up of several hundred green seal characters. A strong chilly wind suddenly blew, and the huge green seal character strangely shrunk to the size of a few miles. As the green seal character shrunk, a whirlpool of a few miles in size gradually emerged from the green seal character. Waves of green light flowed out from the whirlpool, and Xiaohua felt a sense of familiarity from the bottom of his heart. Teleportation channel? Xiaohua saw the channel and immediately understood the Buddhist sect's intentions. He hurriedly shouted, Murong Songyan, this is a teleportation channel. The Buddhist sect wants to use this channel to send experts over. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.